For the record, my name is Benjamin Weber, District City Councilor for District 6, and I'm the chair of the Boston City Council Committee on Labor, Workforce, and Economic Development. Today is September 22nd, 2025, and the exact time is 10:10. This hearing is being recorded, and it is also being live streamed at boston.gov/city-council-tv and broadcast on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, and FiOS Channel 964. Written comments may be sent to the committee email at ccc.labor@boston.gov and will be made part of the record and available for all councilors. Do you have that email? Okay. Public testimony will be taken at the end of the hearing. Individuals will be called on in the order in which they signed up and will have 2 minutes to testify. If you are interested in testifying in person, please add your name to the sign-up sheet near the entrance of the chamber. If you are looking to testify virtually, please email our central staff liaison, Ron Cobb, at ron.cobb with 2 B's, COBB at boston.gov for the link, and your name will be added to the list. We will be hearing from 2 panels today and on 2 dockets. I spoke with Councilor Flynn. I believe we'll be covering both dockets at the same time. I feel like they're interwoven, and hopefully we'll be able to leave enough time to cover both of them in our questioning and answers. So today's hearing is on docket number 0323, in order for a hearing to discuss the impact of CORI on access to employment and other opportunities, and docket number 1618, hearing order regarding immediate reforms to background checks, sex offender screening, and ongoing stability reviews for the City of Boston hiring and employment. Docket number 0323 was sponsored by Councilors Ed Flynn, Councilor Julia Mejia, and Councilor Enrique Pepin, and was referred to the committee on January 29th, 2025. Is that right? Is that July? Docket number 1618 was sponsored by Councilors Aaron Murphy, Ed Flynn, and John Fitzgerald. My reading of the hearing orders is that the intent of today's hearing is twofold. First, the hearing is intended to discuss what impact having a criminal record has on Boston residents' ability to gain employment and other opportunities, and discuss ways to increase opportunities for those who have been incarcerated for obvious public policy reasons. Relatedly, today's hearing is also meant to look at the general hiring practices of the City of Boston, where it concerns individuals who have criminal records. Before we start, though, I think it would help just to revisit an issue that came before the City Council in January, when in response to docket number 0177, which sought to compel the testimony of the police commissioner, among others, to provide information regarding the reasons for Eddie Crispin's removal from the command staff. We were informed by Corporation Counsel that, quote, the police commissioner and his staff are not required to appear for a hearing to give testimony on the subject of an individual personnel decision which is outside the jurisdiction of the council and which other laws dictate should be treated with confidentiality. I think it just helps to get a little deeper into this. In support of that position, Corporation Counsel pointed to both the city charter and the Massachusetts Public Records Law. Section 17G of the city charter states, quote, neither the city council nor any member, committee, officer, or employee thereof shall directly or indirectly on behalf of the city take part in the employment of labor, nor in the conduct of the executive or administrative business of the city or county, nor in the appointment or removal of any city or county employee. According to Corporation Counsel, requesting information regarding the demotion of Eddie Crispin was akin to, quote, at least indirectly seeking to take part in the employment of labor and the conduct of the executive business of the city and the appointment or removal of a city employee, and therefore, this, according to the Corporation Counsel, the City Council lacked jurisdiction to inquire about the reasons for Crispin's demotion. In addition, Corporation Counsel looked at the Public Records Law, MGL Chapter 4, Section 7, which includes exceptions for the requirement that to make information public. One of the exceptions is disclosure of personnel information. In conclusion, the Corporation Counsel wrote that, quote, inquiry into the personnel information of an individual Boston Police Department employee exceeds the City Council's jurisdiction and would require public testimony about personnel matters of an individual employee that state law allows to remain confidential. Now, I'm not a lawyer. No, wait, I am a lawyer. But so looking at the Corporation Council's memo from January, I expect questions today to relate to that are related to specific personnel decisions. It's very likely they'll be met with the same answer, that the council can ask general policy and procedure questions, and even how those policies are applied. But questions regarding individual personnel decisions are not within our jurisdiction. To the extent that the panelists cite to an opinion of their legal counsel, I do expect my colleagues to be respectful and move on to other topics, such as general policies that the panelists are able to discuss. I don't expect our panelists to argue the merits of their counsel's legal opinion. The two hearing orders before us today raise important issues that merit a wide-ranging discussion about city policies and how we can help our residents who have been incarcerated and have criminal records. Today, I'm joined by my colleagues in order of arrival, Councilor Ed Flynn. And just before us, the first panel, we're joined today by a Chief of Human Services, Jose Masso, Alex Lawrence, the Chief People Officer, and Lou Mandarini, the Senior Advisor for Labor. Do I have that right, everybody? Okay. So we are going to get started, before, if the panel has a presentation, I don't know, Councilor Flynn, do you have an opening statement? Okay. Opening statement to you, and then we'll hear from the panelists.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just for the record, I know I wasn't expecting that you were going to speak on Eddie Crispin, but just in full transparency, I supported Deputy Superintendent Eddie Crispin. I know him. I've known him for years. I know the work and his integrity and his honesty and his professionalism that he's demonstrated as a member of the Boston Police Department, as a community leader, as a deputy superintendent, and I respectfully disagreed in demoting a exceptionally well-qualified African-American from the command staff. I'm disappointed. I refiled this hearing order to discuss how we can expand opportunities for people with CORIs. Criminal records often harm access to resources and opportunities for those with prior convictions. And despite progress made on CORI reform in recent years, there is still room for improvement. I do want to acknowledge when Governor Patrick was governor of the Commonwealth, he did excellent work on CORI reform, which I supported. I do think it needs to go further. As a former probation officer for 8 years, I witnessed the impact that CORI can have on a person's ability to access opportunities that would hurt. To access opportunities that would help put them on the right path. The negative aspects, on the other hand, of criminal convictions are also magnified for our communities of color, who not only face higher conviction rates, but tend to face worse at baseline on employment outcomes and related measures of well-being. I also know that the recent CORI reforms enacted by the state, particularly on banning the box, which barred employers from asking early-stage application questions about their criminal history. I'm interested in hearing more about the impact of these reforms and what we can do to further expand opportunities for people with records. We need to ensure that people with records are given a fair chance in getting jobs and other opportunities. One of the most disappointing aspects of being a probation officer is helping someone get a job. When they did get a job, they would be on the job for a few weeks, and then at a period of time after that, the CORI would come back, and even though the person was doing an excellent job, they were basically fired from their position, not in the city, but just at other companies around Boston. But we have to support our returning citizens. The second aspect I do want to speak on is the emergency hearing order. The City of Boston HR process must include criminal background checks. I filed this emergency hearing order with Councilor Murphy to investigate how the system broke down. Job applicants with open criminal cases for violent crimes were hired. Last month, we deferred to the administration and canceled my hearing on Monday, August 18th, regarding the impact of CORI after it was discovered that a level 3 sex offender was on the City of Boston payroll as recently as October 12th. We want to make sure that when we hire new hires for the City of Boston, that they are part of the background check, part of the CORI, and we want to know what that process is, and specifically on this situation, was there a CORI actually done? And if it was done, what happened? If it wasn't done, why it wasn't done? But I want to ask some related questions about that particular incident. I'm going to stop there. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. I don't know, you can work it out amongst yourselves where you want to start, panel.
Great. I think I will kick us off, if that's okay. So for those of you I don't know, hi, my name is Alex Lawrence, and I'm the city's Chief People Officer across the City of Boston. I'm really proud to be the first person ever to hold this title. I've explained this in other hearings, but in previous administrations, our Chief Financial Officer oversaw all workforce functions, and this administration, under our current mayor, Mayor Michelle Wu, recognized the need to have someone an entire cabinet dedicated to overseeing the policies, practices, and administration of our workforce. We have an incredibly large and varied workforce. We have 18,000 employees of the City of Boston institution. It's 23,000 if you include our quasi-agencies. And we hire hundreds of employees every year. We hold all of our employees to a really high standard of conduct, including when we hire them and once they're here. We also apply standards across every stage of the employment life cycle. We also seek, as an organization, to ensure that individuals with criminal records are able to find gainful employment. And so our policies and procedures strive to hit that balance, the balance between those principles. And implementing those policies every day can be really hard and complicated work. Our employees overall are hardworking, dedicated individuals who clean our streets, they teach our children, they maintain our parks, and we count on them collectively not only to do their jobs well, but to help us all uphold public trust in government. And as such, we've dedicated a lot of time and attention into training our workforce and our managers in management and supervision skills, and on developing really holistic workforce policies. We've built teams to manage our hiring processes, and we've built out teams that investigate incidents when they happen in the workplace. Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm now going to turn it over to my colleague, Chief Jose Masso, to tell you more about our partnerships with returning citizens and with the reentry community.
Thank you so much, Chief Lawrence, and good morning, councilors. For the record, my name is Jose Masso. I serve as Chief of Human Services. My cabinet houses 6 departments, one of which includes the Office of Returning Citizens. Every year, about 3,000 individuals return to Boston from incarceration. Their transition is not simple. It's marked by multiple compounding barriers: securing a state ID, which is essential for benefits, employment, and housing; rebuilding relationships with family, including their children; facing stigma when applying for jobs or housing; and managing deferred mental and physical health needs. Without support, these barriers don't just affect individuals. They ripple across families, neighborhoods, and our city as a whole. The Office of Returning Citizens exists to meet those challenges head-on. ORC provides case management, housing and employment assistance, and connections to resources across the city. This office was created under Mayor Walsh, but it has flourished under Mayor Wu's leadership, who, in partnership with City Council, increased the budget and staffing significantly. In just 4 years, ORC has grown from a staff of 2 to a team of 11, allowing us to expand services, deepen partnerships, and so much more. As someone who believes deeply in second chances and in the need to invest in returning citizens so we can break the cycle of recidivism, I am proud of the work the ORC team does every day. They have built strong pipelines to employment and have advocated with businesses to overcome stigma and see the value of hiring individuals with the CORIs. We maintain a database of CORI-friendly employers and actively connect our clients to these opportunities. We are also developing an employee advisory group, a space for sharing best practices, celebrating success stories, and encouraging more Boston employers to join this work. At this time, we provide comprehensive job readiness support as well. Soft skills training, mock interviews, resume building, application assistance, and access to professional attire. These are practical tools, but they also restore confidence and dignity. We always welcome ways to improve our service and look forward to working with stakeholders in this space to do better. At its core, reentry is about balance. On the one hand, we must ensure the safety and well-being of our neighborhoods, and on the other hand, we must ensure that people returning home have a real chance at rebuilding their lives. We cannot sacrifice the sense of public safety for our ideals, but we also cannot and will not abandon the promise of second chances. We owe it to our residents, our communities, and our city to do both. With your continued partnership, we will. Thank you.
Good morning, councilors. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. I'll reserve time on an opening statement and simply engage in questions and conversation. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. We have been joined by Councilor Liz Braden. Hello. Councilor Flynn, how about 6 minutes, and we'll maybe then come back for a second round or third. Yeah. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I highlighted the balance that is needed to support returning citizens and respecting the public and ensuring public safety for the residents of Boston. There was a recent hire, I believe at the Parks Department, allegedly a level 3 sex offender. Was a CORI conducted on that person?
Go ahead.
Councilor, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I think this gets exactly at the directive you gave at the start of the hearing that we're not going to discuss the facts of individual cases.
But what I will do is talk to the kinds of positions that we provide criminal background checks for, because I do think that would be instructive for a more general policy-making conversation. So
Okay, let me.
Please.
If Lou doesn't want to answer it, then that's fine. So you don't want to answer that, Lou, right?
Well, I want to adhere to the rules and the laws that govern this hearing, which the chairman read out at the beginning of the hearing, because
Lou, if you don't want to answer
if
it.
you don't adhere to rules and laws of
Lou,
a
if you don't
hearing,
want
what you have is a circus. Counselor?
Lou, if you don't want to answer, just say I
Counselor,
decline.
I want to adhere to the rules and the laws that govern the hearing.
I understand,
It's not
Lou.
a matter of wanting to do anything.
Lou, do you want to answer the question? Let me ask you a question, Lou. If the city of Boston wants to hire someone, they do a CORI on a particular person, and it's found out that the person is a level 3 sex offender, what happens?
So let me take that question, if I may, unless you want to take it, Lou?
I don't.
Okay.
Well, okay.
You want Lou to answer it first?
Yeah, I'd like Lou to, because he wanted to, he wanted not to answer my original question, so he seemed to.
Counselor, I would defer to Ms. Lawrence on the question. I would simply lodge an objection to adhere to the rules that are supposed to govern the hearing. That's all I was objecting to.
Would you like me to answer the question?
Yes.
Okay, happy to. So depending on a specific position, we may or may not run a different kind of background check. So just to be a little bit more specific here, there are some positions at the City of Boston which require interacting with vulnerable populations, other positions which are designated to interact directly with the public in unsupervised ways. So generally, those are the two kinds of high-level categories that might determine whether or not we run a criminal background check. Again, this is really complicated. It depends what's in the job description, and what charges come in and what charges are acceptable to hire someone with will really depend on that intersection, the nature of the position, the very specific details, and that's how we uphold those higher principles that we described at the beginning, which is ensuring that we're upholding public trust while giving people second chances. So specific positions are designated to either interact with vulnerable populations or interact specifically with the public. We recognize that sometimes the sort of details of those job descriptions have not always been 100% right. And so as that, we're reviewing and going back into reviewing our job descriptions to determine which kinds of background checks should apply to which kinds of positions.
So for a position at, for example, at BCYF or a position at Parks and Recreation, BCYF, they're likely going to be working with or in and around youth. Parks and Recreation, they're likely to work in and around parks and sports. If someone came back with a level 3 sex offender conviction, would that automatically disqualify them just for those two specific departments?
If-
Knowing that they are going to work with youth or they're going to work in a parks and recreation environment?
In a job where the job description or the position, if we included that it includes unsupervised contact with vulnerable populations or the public, then yes, our current again, there's tons of jobs, and you painted a pretty wide brush in what you just described, but assuming that the core function of that job is to interact with the public, yes, it would require a background check. That could require a CORI or CORI, again, depending on the nature of the population.
Well, it would always require a CORI. Wouldn't every new job applicant that could be hired go through a criminal background check?
Not across all positions across the city, but yes, if the specific job function is to interact with the public. And as I was saying, I think that we have been reviewing those job descriptions and ensuring that we have that right across every single job description and job category.
Well, could I make a recommendation?
Yeah.
When a department like Parks and Recreation or BCYF, could we always do a CORI investigation when someone is being hired in those particular departments?
I think that what we would have to do in order to be compliant with the laws and with our collective bargaining agreements is revisit those job descriptions and think carefully about which of those jobs do require interacting with the public.
But if you're working at BCYF or you're working at Parks and Recreation, there's a strong likelihood that you're going to be working with youth or you're going to be working in an environment at a park that youth will be at or children will be at. My question is, knowing that, can we ensure that a criminal background check does take place for every new hire at the Parks and Recreation and BCYF? That's my recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, this is something that we're looking at.
Would you enact that?
Again, we can't just enact a blanket policy. We will be looking at the job descriptions and making sure that if we think it is likely that that person is going to have unsupervised public contact, to add that in the context of the job description, and then, yes, we can require that a background check.
Can I supplement that answer, Counselor?
Yes.
So I think we've got some challenges here. When we look at a blanket policy of CORIing everyone, there's all kinds of analyses that go in to protect the city against potential liability, protect the city against engaging in disparate treatment. So I think we have to take a look at things like, what was the age of the person, at the time of the conviction? How serious was it? How much time has elapsed since the conviction? Is there any relevance to the position sought, the facts of the conviction? Does the person have pending charges now? There's all kinds of questions that we have to ask before we implement any kind of a CORI policy across the board. These are the things we need to look at, and it's a matter of using a scalpel instead of an axe. And these are the things we're looking at now, and it's challenging. As you can tell from the questions that I just laid out to you, this really is a big balancing test between the due process rights of the person you want to hire and protecting the city and the city's ability to provide basic services. So these are the things we have to look at. Your suggestion is one we certainly would take under advisement, but there is a lot to do and a lot to think about before we could implement such a policy.
But I do want to be clear, because there is a strong likelihood when you're working at those particular departments, and probably other departments as well, such as the Boston Public School System, that if you are a level 3 sex offender, that should almost disqualify you from working there. That's That's my opinion. That's what I believe. I didn't come to the city council to be a rubber stamp for anybody. I came here to do my due diligence, to ask tough questions, to make changes. And that's the recommendation I'm making. And I know I don't want to speak for you, but I do think it's important that at least those 3 departments, we should not have level 3 sex offenders working those 3 departments. But that is being under review. Is that accurate?
It is.
Councillor Flynn, well over 6 minutes. Just we're going to have multiple rounds. I just want to be respectful of our colleagues' time.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Braden.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
As I really get the sense that there's this whole really critical balancing act that has to take place with regard to reviewing potential employees and not, as you say, give them due process and making sure that you're not making it more difficult for folks who want to have a second chance to get gainful employment and move on with their lives after making mistakes in their previous life. So in terms of across the board, Director Lawrence, how many job classifications do we have CORI background checks? Like, I know I worked in education. I'm a physical therapist. We had to get fingerprinted and CORI checked every couple of years. It's like, it was routine. That was what you did. So if you work with kids. But, you know, I think in some of these jobs, like I think Councillor Flynn referenced Parks and Rec. Well, you know, there's a team of tree maintenance people who don't have day-to-day contact with the public necessarily. You know, what sort of job classifications do we have required CORI checks for? And it's not an across-the-board approach.
Yeah, so, you know, again, we have truly, I couldn't tell you the number of job classifications we have across the city. It's in, you know, probably 1,000. But specifically the pre-employment screenings with CORI happen for staff who have direct unsupervised conduct with vulnerable populations, specifically under children under 18 or less, disabled, the elderly, and then some positions are SORI, again, the sexual offender registry, and that has to do with, again, the populations that I just described, and a lot of those are pre-designated by state law too. So, you know, educators that you described, those all have required background checks. And then if we were to get into categories like police or fire, those have even much more extensive kinds of background checks that, you know, see different kinds of offenses that even we as the city, generally HR would have access to. So it really just depends on the job classification.
Mm-hmm. And then in terms of, you know, you say, and this is maybe a question for Mr. Masso, in terms of, you know, you have a database of CORI-friendly employers, like it's really important to have a robust infrastructure to and a pipeline for folks to redirect their lives and get back into gainful employment. Do we, how do we support our CORI-friendly employers and then, just in terms of policy terms, make sure that we're doing due diligence on keeping everyone safe?
Yeah, as far as supporting the employers, credit to Eric James, who's sitting in the audience, who's our employment specialist at the ORC, does a really just significant job in creating relationships with employers. It really is building up the pipeline. And so it's all about education and advocacy as well, educating employers of, you know, what the CORI policies are, what the requirements are, and how it is that we are able to build up a pipeline in terms of if they need a workforce. We have, as I mentioned, 3,000 individuals coming home annually who are looking for jobs, right? And, you know, we believe every individual has a right to their basic needs, making sure that they can feed their family and themselves, and that requires being employed, right? And so it's about the education process in which he works closely with them to make sure that they have connections, that they have openings and job opportunities, working with individuals on a case-by-case basis, determining what their skill sets are, where it is that they're looking to be employed, and how it is that we can make that connection, basically.
And then in terms of the city's own pipeline, like how have we developed, or we have an in-house pipeline as well?
We have. We have with several departments. We've done job fairs. I think we've done 2 over the past, year, in which we've had other city departments be able to join, interview some returning citizens, be able to go through the application process as well, just to be able to say, what the needs are, taking a look at where the vacancies are on their part, and seeing how we can also make a match on that end as well. And so, there's still a lot of work that we're looking to do to be able to strengthen that. And based in working closely with Chief Lawrence and her team, Ashley has been doing a really good job with that as well, to ensure that we have these opportunities available.
Good. And then, and just in terms of, I know this might be getting into the weeds a little, but in terms of sex offenders, like there's different grades of offence. Can you give us some background, just even like what the different grades are and how, is that reasonable? And that's a reasonable question that you can answer at this moment.
So I would say I am not an expert in this, but what I can tell you is that the SORB, which is the State Sex Offender Registry Board, provides some really helpful explanations of those tiers. And I know at a large scale, those tiers are based on their estimation of the likelihood of recidivism as well as the nature of the crimes. That I am not an expert in this. There are probably people in here who can do a way better job at answering that, but that's my understanding.
That's fine. So folks who want to learn more about it can just go online and look it up on the state
Exactly.
website. Very good. How am I doing for time? I've got 17 seconds left. I think I'll yield the rest of my time and pass it back. Thank you.
Thank you. I just have 2 questions and start a second round. I think this question is for Lou. In terms of just the framework here for who we can hire, who we can run background checks on, what rules we can have in place for, let's just say, like you have this on your record, we're not going to hire you for this job. Like, is this what's dictated by state law? Is it case based on what the cases say? How do we?
So Councillor, I would say based on the information that I've shared so far, there are the kinds of things you're looking at in crafting a CORI policy. So again, those are things like, the relevance of the crime to the position, what's the nature of the position, how long ago was the conviction, what was the age of the person. So I think there's best practice. So I think best practice is if you're going to come up with a CORI policy, it should be one that applies across all people that could be in the position. That's when you get into problems with disparate treatment, that you do a CORI for this person or these 3 people, but not these 4 people. So those are the kind of things I think you want to look at the time of initial hiring. Your question, I think, implicates, and tell me if I'm wrong, what happens when someone is actually already an employee. So there's the time of hiring, where someone is a probationary employee for a 6-month period. And then there's what happens when you're actually already here.
Yeah.
Now, is that something you wanted to cover, or?
You can answer that if you want, if you think it would help our discussion. My question was more of just, if we're coming up with rules of, if you have crime A on your record, we're not gonna hire you for job B, but we might hire you for job C. Like, is that dictated by state law, or do we are able to make up those rules ourselves as a city, or is there a state law or a case law that dictates?
Some of it for some positions is certainly dictated by state law. Most of it is not. So, I would say, and just to get back to the question, I think the question, because far more people actually already work here, out of the 23,000 than ones we're hiring. So I think a point that is important to know, and I think it's for the edification of the council, 91% of our employees at the City of Boston are represented by a labor organization. So if they are here and they are an employee who is represented by a union, there's a whole constellation of things that you have to consider with respect to, CORIs and SORIs, because it implicates bargaining law. So, who has got access to this information? How long is this information going to be relied upon? How many years is this going to be used for purposes of making decisions with respect to promotions or that kind of thing? What's going to happen with respect to discipline? What's the nature of the discipline, the length of the discipline? Does it implicate progressive discipline? There's almost a limitless number of questions you can come through. The decision to use CORI is a managerial prerogative, but the impacts or the effects on employees is very much a subject of bargaining. It's barnacled with all kinds of questions of mandatory subjects of bargaining and things we have to do. So I think the fair answer to your question is there is the time of hiring, and then there's when someone's actually already an employee, and they're two very different lines of inquiry.
Okay, and my just last question is, I could be totally wrong about this. When you do, in terms of in-state, out-of-state, when you're doing these CORI and record, are we just looking for in-state records? If somebody has a criminal record in another state, does it show up in Massachusetts? I'm just curious how that plays out. Somebody is applying for a job here and they're maybe just moved here from somewhere else.
Yeah, generally speaking, the background checks we run are within the state. This is something we also are looking into. And again, I think I just want to sort of state for the laws that former Governor Patrick passed, all of the sort of policy around criminal justice reform that was described. When we also pull records, there are a ton of regulations about what we, even as an employer who have a higher level of being able to pull these background checks, are able to see. Did they happen in juvenile? Are they sealed? Like, there are so many sort of complex rules that are incredibly important to protect all of the things that we're all here to talk about, that we're able to see once we even do pull those records.
I'm just, sorry, Councilor French, to follow up, if a record is sealed, like what comes up in our search?
So, I mean, again, it depends on a whole host of reasons, but often they will not appear on the background check at all. Other times they will have very specific statuses that, we have people here who are much more trained on I than how to interpret. They'll say, they'll be held in some dismissal status or other things. It really just depends, again, on the nature of the charge and a bunch of specific details.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councilor Flynn, second round, 6 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. And just to respond to Chief People Officer Alex Lawrence, as a probation, I worked with a lot of level 1, 2, and 3 sex offenders, but level 3 sex offender is the highest risk of a sex offender, and that person is likely to reoffend. And that's why I was concerned about a particular employee that was working in the Parks Department. That is the most serious sex offender, and having a person with a level 3 conviction working in and around parks and recreation on ballparks and playgrounds where there are children around, that is concerning to me. But having said that, why wouldn't someone that is going for a particular job at the Parks and Recreation Department, knowing that they're going to be interacting with youth or being on ballparks and with children, why wouldn't that be disqualification for that particular job?
So let me think about how best to answer the way you phrased that question. I think that, as I said, we are looking at which positions we've categorized as interacting with the public, and I think realistically you're correct in saying that that if you think and look at it very closely, that a position that works in playgrounds is even if the job description does not specifically state, has unsupervised conduct, an interaction with the public, that is pretty likely to occur, which is why we are reviewing job descriptions like the one that you described to see if we have it correctly classified.
They may not have unsupervised contact with the public, but they're still on the same playground with children, and they might be cleaning up the park, they might be fixing something at the park. So they may not have direct supervision or interaction with children, but why would we put that child in jeopardy in the first place, knowing that there's a level 3 sex offender that's in the very close proximity to that particular child?
I think, as I've said, we are looking at those job descriptions and identifying whether or not we had them correctly classified.
But my point is, knowing someone is working at the Parks Department, knowing someone is working at BCYF, knowing someone is working at the Boston Public School System, why take that chance, knowing that they're going to be interacting somehow or close proximity to students, to youth, to playgrounds where children gather? Why just not universally say level 3 sex offenders cannot work at these particular departments?
Counselor, if I may, I think this goes directly to the heart of the balancing equation that we've got to do here between giving people a second chance and their due process rights and hiring folks to make sure that we deliver basic city services in the proper way. The point you're making is that you think the balance is off, that we're maybe too lenient with respect to some of the people that are potentially hired now, and that's a question that we can kick around here. But I think the point here, Counselor, is that this is hard.
No,
balancing.
The point.
But if I may,
the point I'm making, Lou, is I'm being specific on level 3 sex offenders. I understand the importance of hiring returning citizens because they're important to our city, but I'm being specific only on level 3 sex offenders on specific departments. Is that fair of how I ask questions at this time?
Sure, and I think, again, the distinction we're making is it's not about the department, it's about the nature of the job itself, which is the thing that we are looking at.
I would also say, Counselor, I think the question of recidivism and, how automatic it is and those things, those are the kind of questions we've got to get into. This is the stuff that we're doing as we look at this, as we review our policy. Are there experts and advocates and folks that can help inform our policy as to, how long ago a conviction was, if it's still relevant, what the chances are of recidivism? These are the questions we've got to look at. And it's impossible to sort of take a cookie cutter and say we're going to do this without having the expertise and the information that's going to inform what makes the most sense in terms of this balancing test we've got to do between people's rights and giving people a second chance and delivering excellent city services. You are getting to the heart of the question.
Lou, I've always given people second chances. That's what I did as a probation officer. That's what I did full-time, helping returning citizens. My specific question and concern is a level 3 sex offender being hired in certain departments, such as the Parks Department or BCYF or the Public School Department. I think there should be a universal blanket of disqualification for a level 3 sex offender to be hired in those particular departments for obvious reasons. They're most likely to reoffend. I don't know why you're pushing back on that, Lou, but that's what I believe. I believe we can't put the public in jeopardy with a level 3 sex offender interacting in close proximity to youth. That's what I believe.
Any response?
I mean, aside from understanding your position and, considering it as we move forward in our reform efforts, no, I have no response.
Okay, Councillor Flynn, we'll come back for a follow-up. Thank you. So we have been joined by Councillors Aaron Murphy and Councillor Sharon Durkin. We're on our second round of questions. We have another panel after this. At some point we'll move on, but not yet. So Councillor Braden, 6 minutes.
I'm going back to the issue about relevance of the crime to the position. I think this is the process you're sort of embarking on, is to sort of relook at all of those job positions and figure out if there's particular CORI records that would be relevant to the position, and then maybe making some sort of a policy decision on what would or would not be an appropriate hire for a particular position. Am I correct in that analysis?
Yeah, and if I should say, this is the complicated work that our departments already do every day, right? When there are some positions, as I've said, that we don't run criminal background checks for. For the ones we do, those often return back criminal history based on what the criminal justice system has records that they provide us, and we already have some processes and standard operating procedures and guidelines in terms of how we look at them and whether we consider them. So yes, that is work that we are continuing to do, but it is work that we already do. And we did sort of early on in this administration make sure that we're providing a more standardized set of guidance for our departments, because when we don't do that, we end up sort of leaving the designation up to an individual hiring manager, and that has all sorts of challenges and problems and personal biases that come into it. So one of the things that we've done already is create a standard operating procedure and train our HR professionals in terms of which things they should be interpreting, which things they shouldn't. But that is always ongoing work. As we learn more things, as time progresses, we refine that, and we continue to look at it.
And I know there's been a lot of emphasis on, the CORI and the sexual crimes background, but in terms of other types of offences, like maybe defrauding elders, or there's a broad range of offences that would trigger some sort of a thought that maybe this isn't the best. Someone who's caught financially defrauding, or depending on the department they're in or whatever, is that all of that taken into consideration?
Yes, so like that, we would call it a nexus between the nature of the job and the nature of the conviction would be something that we could consider, again, depending on certain circumstances, and also the length of time since the crime has occurred.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of recidivism, like I know the City of Boston's been doing this for a while. Do we have any sort of data on the record of recidivism, and folks sticking to the path and turning their lives around, or do we have any records on the level of recidivism in our hires?
Overall, or within your space, specifically within the workforce?
Yes.
No, we don't.
Yeah. Okay. I'm still going to.
And again, we wouldn't necessarily. I mean, there'd be so much that we wouldn't know there. We're not regularly cross-referencing our employees with.
Well, that's probably a good thing.
Exactly.
It's not been flagged up as, oh goodness, this person's straying again. I think that's all. I've got three new colleagues coming in to ask questions, so I'll yield my time, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We have been joined by Councillor Mejia. We've Councillor Murphy, Councillor Durkin, and Councillor Mejia to finish our second round here. Councillor Murphy, 6 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. And I know Councilor Flynn and I filed this back a couple months ago. Thank you for being here for, this important conversation about balancing everyone's right to a second chance. And when you do pay your debt back to society, you have every right to be welcomed back into society. And as we know, the City of Boston, right, we're a big workforce. We hire a lot of people. And as you know, that's your job. So, but there has to, be a balance. So I guess my first question is the recent, news stories that kind of brought, I think, to light to the public, kind of questioning, do you think there is a need for a complete overhaul in the way we have been screening and hiring people, or do you think these were individual cases that slipped through the cracks?
So I think what we've sort of covered is that it is certainly a delicate balance to be able to uphold the public trust and uphold the importance of our work while ensuring that we're giving opportunities to all individuals, including those who have been previously incarcerated. We think that our policy as a whole is very much a best practice, and that specifically individual jobs can be reviewed in terms of their exactly how we've classified them and which background checks should apply to them, and that is a process that we are currently looking at.
So not all information is required or even legally allowed for different individual hiring managers, is that true?
Can you repeat
So,
the
well,
question?
you're saying, like, how much of a background do we do on every hire? And if it's a specific job, do we do more of a background check? And
So-
do individual managers even have access to that information, or is this a need for them to ask?
Yeah, so I'm going to just sort of repeat a little bit of some of the explanation that we've provided, but individual jobs based on the individual job description, so a position may be classified as either a job that requires a CORI and or a SORI. Whether or not that job requires it has to do with, first of all, like, where is that job? Are there specific state regulations or federal regulations that oversee the specific nature of that job? Also, there is some of this that is implicated in collective bargaining, which union is this job in, et cetera. There are also very specific sort of both best practice guidance as well as law on which kinds of criminal background checks should be run based on if this job interacts with vulnerable populations or interact with the public. That is determined by what exactly is written in the job description about the nature of the work. And so that is really that balance and that work that we're doing is ensuring that we think that each of those job descriptions is correctly classified and correctly described. So I don't think there is a big holistic change that needs to be made to our policy, but I do think it's fair to say that it is worth us looking at all of those individual jobs and sort of saying, I think it's tough, right? All of our jobs are public jobs, and they're incredibly important to uphold public trust. And so we have to make sure that those jobs are adequately reflected in terms of the likelihood that they are to have direct and unsupervised contact with the public, and that is an exercise that we are undergoing.
I would assume, but I could be wrong, that if you are a level 3 sex offender, that the list of jobs you could apply to is small, I would assume. Is that true? Or are there lots of jobs that even if the background check obviously showed it or the candidate was forthcoming of this information?
What I'll say is I'm going to quote our director of the Office of Returning Citizens, Ashley Montgomery. Yeah, level 3 sex offenders are really difficult to place. They're the hardest, specific kinds of individuals who have committed crimes that are the hardest to place.
And so, I know we'll probably hear from you, but if you're somebody trying to help someone who has this past, are you aware of the limited number of, say, city jobs you can even encourage them to apply to? Or does it then all depend on whether or not this one was flagged to have the background check or not? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I totally understand the
I
question.
mean, if someone came to me and said, hey, I'm looking for a job, I'm, a early childhood license, what jobs could I apply to in BPS? I could look and say, here are the jobs you can apply to, or this is, I have this in my background, these are the jobs that you may think it's a good job, you may do a good job at it, but because of this in your past, you're not even allowed to apply. Is there a clear list of jobs that the city has that someone either hiring and interviewing, or even the person, because I know, and I think it's great, and we continue on this body to fund the Office of Returning Citizens to make sure there are resources to help people find employment after they get out of jail.
Yeah.
Is there a clear list of jobs that?
So I'll let Jose, you can speak to the specifics of the resources, but what I'll say is we would never tell somebody that they aren't allowed to apply to a job, and we don't, it is, I believe it's someone can correct me if it's state or federal law, and I'm sure we'll hear from our amazing experts on this later, but we don't run background checks until we intend to make an offer to an individual. So we will, on a posting, state which kinds of checks are required, but we would never say that somebody isn't allowed to apply. I just want to be very clear about that.
But it does list it, though. It would say, like, these are
Yes.
the background checks.
It would
that
always,
will
it would always do that. Yes,
Okay.
any job would.
Okay, I hear my buzzer going, so I'll wait for the next round, but I think this is the last round with this panel, so thank you I was listening in. There's traffic on North Street with all the construction outside of City Hall. I'm sorry I was a few minutes late, but thank you.
Thanks, Councilor Murphy. I was thinking at the end of this, we'll maybe a short round. I'll figure out the time. But so we've just been joined by Madam President Louis Jen, but Councilor Durkin, 6 minutes.
Thank you so much, Chair. And I want to thank this panel. I think it's really important that with 23,000 city employees, that we're ensuring we're doing everything we can to ensure that they're meeting the standards that we've set forth. But as I've said, I don't believe it's the City Council's role to focus on individual instances per the city charter. So I'm going to focus my questions on, and I'll just note that reading through these two hearing orders, they have very, very different approaches. One of them's mostly about an individual incident, and then the other one is about opportunities for employment. But I do think it's important that we have these conversations not in silo, and I think putting these two hearing orders together gives us the opportunity to have potentially a really nuanced conversation. So I just want to thank you all. I think one thing I'm concerned about is privacy for city workers, given the conversation that we're having. How can we ensure that backgrounds of individual city employees are not a topic of conversation? Because I do think when we have 23,000 employees, we could, as a city council, try to dig into each one of their backgrounds, but to be honest, it's not our business. And I am just curious how you all safeguard individual city employees' private information.
Sure, yes, which is why we're today not discussing the details of any individual case. Both, Lou outlined it, but both sort of specifically because of laws and rules about both what this specific body should be inquiring in, but also just in general because personnel records are exempt from public records for good reason because of individual privacy and protections.
Councilor, if I could just add to that, I would say, with respect to, both with respect to initial hires and employees who are here, a lot of this is fixed by statute, who can have access to these records and what they can be used for, what is improper, and then I would say added to that, when we get to the aspects of our own employees, 91% of whom are in a union, that adds all of the questions of, what are these records going to be used for? Are they going to be used for discipline? Are they going to be used for who gets a promotion? All of that is contractual and a subject of negotiation, but it's captured in a contract at the end. So that also governs privacy and how these things are used and how they'll be disposed of. So I would say you have the initial statutes and then you have public sector collective bargaining law, which forms sort of a belt and suspenders approach to guarantee privacy in so much as we can.
Okay, and my second question is, how does your office, Chief Lawrence, evaluate risk in hiring certain types of employees? Because I think that's what we're really talking about here, is giving folks a second chance that have a background. There is a risk associated with that, but there's also good associated with that, and how do you measure that good versus that risk?
Yeah, human work is, like, working in people operations is always complicated, which is why we have sets of policies, laws, federal, state, et cetera, procedures that help us really think about those things. So one of the things that we as administration did pretty early on is not necessarily change our CORI policy, but really roll out more clear standardized operating procedures for our HR directors so that they can deeply both understand sort of like what the rules and restrictions are around, so that we were making sure that we're being as appropriate and standard as possible in terms of who has visibility into those records. So a lot of it is handled centrally by the Office of Human Resources. And then only, again, in specific circumstances, if a positive result comes back, will we sort of share those with the department and make a recommendation on a determination on, again, things like the nature of the charges, the length of time since they've occurred. That's basically the most important calculations. And then help make a hiring decision.
Okay, thank you. And I guess my top concern about conversations like these is I think working for the city of Boston is honorable work. It's important work. And I do think we have to defend the honorableness of working for the city of Boston. So how do you and your office build public trust in who you're hiring, and then also what mechanisms exist to ensure that when there is an allegation or suspicion of some wrongdoing, that it's adequately addressed?
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm extremely passionate about this topic, which is why I think I have a really challenging but probably the greatest job that I could ever hope to have, which is ensuring that we are investing in our workforce and also that we're upholding public trust. And so since the creation of my cabinet over the last 4 years, we've done a tremendous amount of work doing the very things that you're talking about. Previously, when I got to this position, I would hear that incidents in the workplace would happen, and sometimes it would take 2 years for them to be appropriately investigated and dealt with. We now have an employee relations team that is devoted explicitly to this function. It's a 4-person team, including 2 investigators, and we close things within a matter of weeks to ensure that we appropriately handle anything that arises in the workplace. We created a code of conduct that we passed citywide to ensure that once individuals are here, we're holding them to a high standard and upholding the public trust. And then finally, I think one of the most important things we do is train managers and supervisors and employees in our policies. So we have 5 different offerings that we do to conduct those trainings. I have employees tell me quite literally on a daily basis, I've been waiting 17 years for this training, and I'm so glad that I'm getting it now. So the work that you're describing is the exact work that my entire cabinet does, and it's work I'm really proud of.
Thank you so much, Chief, and I'm out of time, so I'll yield back.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilor Mejia, 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for being here. I always like to preface my remarks with the understanding that we don't know what we don't know, and when we know better, we do better, right? And I think that these opportunities really help us understand the dynamics of where are the gaps that we need to fill and how we can help support you all in doing just that. And I also think these are opportunities, right? So I choose to experience it from a place of asset, not the deficit. So I'm encouraged that we're having this conversation. I would like to better understand, even before we dive deeper into kind of, if you could just walk me through the anatomy of an employment process here from the beginning to end. Somebody, gets a referral, hey, you should apply for the city of Boston, they're hiring in such said department. Kind of walk me through, if you're someone who is recently a returning citizen, kind of walk me through kind of what their process would look like.
So, Jose, do you want to take the sort of very early stages and then I can go from there?
Yeah, that would be separate from just if anybody's just looking for employment with the city of Boston. Like anybody could,
Anybody, but I'm saying anyone who has specifically a record.
Sure. I mean, if they, go through the pathways of connecting with the Office of Returning Citizens versus going through applying to the city directly, what they would do is connect with a probably case manager at the Office of Returning Citizens, in which they would then direct them based on what it is that their needs are with our employment specialists. From there, they will really determine their skill sets, their areas of interest, where the strengths are, et cetera, and then be able to align with either some outside opportunities, other employers outside of the city of Boston, or if it aligns within the city of Boston as well, to be able to explore what that looks like as well. So it's a nuanced process in which it depends on each individual. But again, that's underneath the assumption that they actually go through the Office of Returning Citizens, because there's so many that don't, that just go ahead and apply directly as well.
And are there positions that are specific they're not, I wouldn't say earmarked, but that they're dedicated to for CORI-friendly positions within the city, like, or let's just say, could you apply for anything, or are there rules or restrictions?
There's policies that really determine which positions are made available for
Okay.
depending on what the offenses were. But again, as what was mentioned earlier, that would not be determined until an offer is made.
Okay.
That is the lever in which you're able to actually run a CORI. So again, you're taking the case by case basis. You're making an offer based on potential and what people are going through the interview process, et cetera, and then determining on the exact position, you're able to really figure out whether or not this individual is able to move forward or not.
Excellent.
Yeah, and I wouldn't describe it as anything like, again, that there are positions where they're not allowed to apply, but of course, the last thing that you want as a job seeker is to be hired for a job and then determined that you can't continue on in that position. I mean, individuals don't want that, which is why we're always clear about the kinds of background checks that we will run on a job. And so, of course, it's less likely that you're going to apply to that job if you see that we are going to run a CORI or a SORI and you think that that will be disqualifying. But again, those are the barriers that that individuals who are seeking employment as returning citizens are keenly well aware of, and therefore are less likely to apply to those jobs. And one of the things that our partnership does is help them identify which jobs either that we won't run that check for because it is not required, and we only run it for positions that we either think that are either required by state law or that we have very good reason to believe that we should uphold it to a very specific standard because of the interaction with the public or vulnerable populations.
Thank you for that. So I'm curious, just do we have a sense in the data how many employees we have how many CORI-friendly positions we have that are occupied?
I don't have that offhand.
Is that legal? I don't even know.
I mean,
Is that information available somewhere? Like, do we know? Is that something that we track?
Counselor, if it's possible to look into it and get back to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm just trying to better understand kind of like how we're tracking our success also, right? Like, it's a both and question. It's like the data usually informs the work, right? And also for me, I know this hearing is not about this, but I'm always curious about how people can move up and out of certain positions. And so if you come in with an entry-level position in the Parks Department or, Public Works, you come in with a CORI, what are your pathways towards moving up the ladder, if you will? So I know that's not what this hearing's about, but I'm also curious about that. So I just want to note for the record that that's something that I'd like to better understand, kind of like the pathways to closing that financial wealth gap that we talk often about. So I just want to name that as something that I'd like to learn more about. And then the other, I got 39 seconds left, good Lord. Then one more question that I have in regards to just when someone who has a CORI or for whatever reason they're not hired, what type of feedback is provided to the individual?
So in general, if somebody isn't hired, what feedback is provided for them? So, we're a very large workforce and it really depends, but I would certainly encourage applicants to seek feedback from the hiring manager in terms of why they aren't selected, and that is a thing that often we're able to provide individuals for. And something we're still working on getting better at. How do we make referrals to other jobs if somebody isn't selected? That is things that our hiring managers do all day, every day, but is certainly an area where we can continue to grow.
Thank you, and because my time is up, I'll just say thank you.
Okay, Councilor Mejia. We've also been joined by Councilor Coletta Zapata. Madam President, Louis Jen, you have 6 minutes. And then Councilor Coletta Zapata, you're going to wrap up this round. Then we're going to see if the sponsors have any other questions, and then we'll move on to the second panel. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the administration for being here and for all of the incredible work that you do. And I apologize for my tardiness, but I know that my colleagues asked questions and got a rundown from my staff. I also want to thank, of course, Chief Masso, Advisor Mandarini, and Chief Lawrence for all the work that you do for the city. Chief Lawrence, I know that this work is hard, but also hearing you saying that this is also very rewarding is is optimistic, and I want to thank you for laboring in love in this work of trying to make sure that Boston jobs are not just open to folks who have connections, right? That the jobs are open to the unconnected. And I want to thank the remarkable leader of the Office of Returning Citizens, Director Montgomery, for the work. We've had a number of conversations, and one of the highlights of the work that I've done here on the Boston City Council is in my first term, our first budget, investing more money into the budget of the Office of Returning Citizens, and for the first time ever, giving out grants to organizations that are themselves run by formerly incarcerated people, often Black and brown women who are formerly incarcerated. This work requires a balancing act, one of where we are not closing the door on anyone who needs an opportunity for employment. That really reduces the recidivism rate when people have employment opportunities, but also making sure that our residents feel safe and secure in knowing who our City of Boston employees are. So that delicate balance is really important for us to get while not closing the door on anyone. I've said this a number of times, none of us are the worst things that we've ever done, and neither are we the best things that we've ever done. We're probably all middling somewhere between that. And I want to thank, again, everyone who does the work of making sure that folks have opportunities for employment. I guess my question to you, Chief Lawrence, and I know we've talked about this quite a bit, one of the issues is about, what jobs are considered public facing and which ones aren't, to the extent that which are there jobs that interact with the public, that don't interact with the public, where we would feel comfortable hiring folks who may have a SORI. And for those who may not be aware, the hardest people to place in employment is anyone who has any sort of sexual assault, sexual offense on their record. And as someone who's the victim of sexual assault, I understand that. But I also need to understand if there are any non-public facing jobs that we have in the City of Boston that anyone, potentially who has a SORI would be eligible, or is that work that your office is currently doing?
Yeah, I would say thank you so much for everything you said, President Lujan, and I think we are in the process of currently doing the exact work that you're describing, is really thinking about that question of interacting with the public, exactly which jobs does it apply to, and what jobs at the city genuinely don't have interacting with the public in them.
And are there jobs where you have there are jobs that require like a CORI, and then there are jobs that require a CORI and a SORI. What are the jobs currently that require a SORI?
So SORI is specifically, again, I'm trying to find the exact wording here, but means that you have direct unsupervised contact, or it applies to roles that have direct unsupervised contact with vulnerable populations, specifically children 18 or less, disabled people, and the elderly. That is sort of I think how the statute describes SORI required.
Right. So I guess one of the things that you may be looking at is, because that to me, that's a limited definition, right, in unsupervised, but there's a potential way to read it, or to add on to it breadth that maybe we haven't been adding, that we haven't had so far, that we haven't had to this point, in terms of what it means to have unsupervised contact. And is that sort of where the work is right now?
Exactly. So, it can be very clear. Some job descriptions are extremely explicit about what that interaction looks like, and others are sort of silent on that topic, and that is the work that we're currently doing, is trying to make sure that our job descriptions sort of really adequately reflect whether or not that contact exists.
And can you tell me a little bit about the process that you're currently using, like who you're talking to? Because again, a lot of this is not black and white. Most of the hard work is not black and white. There's a lot of gray. Who are the people that you're seeking counsel with? Are you talking to folks in the returning citizen community? Are you talking to labor attorneys? Who are the folks that you're consulting with in terms of figuring out what the best possible policy is?
Thank you for that question. Yeah, so we are collaborating with the Office of Returning Citizens and all of the advocates they're currently working with to ensure that we get this policy right, and also with labor attorneys, et cetera. And if there are people who feel like they really have something to say as part of that conversation, we'll certainly be reviewing all of the public testimony here today, and can continue to do those outreach, or take any referrals from folks on this body who think that they have someone that we should be consulting as part of this policy. But it'll be a collaborative effort across the administration and the connections that we currently have, and making sure all those voices are heard as we continue to refine this balance in our policies.
Thank you. And I'm sure that there are a number of people who are working in the city, again, without disclosing anyone's private information, who are doing good work for the city, who have had some sort of interaction with our carceral system, correct? Who are doing well, because it's important for us to remember that a lot of our carceral system, those who have criminal records, disproportionately people who are people of color, who are rooted in issues of systemic racism and poverty. So it's really important for us to remember when we're talking about potentially making it harder for some to get jobs, we are doing that to the detriment of communities that have too often been left out and forgotten. And that's the reason why we have recidivism rates that are higher than what we would like. And so I don't have any additional questions, and I just want to say thank you, because I know that this work is hard and that you're in the muck, and I want to thank you for being in the muck. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I guess just before we get to Councilor Coletta Zapata, I mean, I guess this is for Chief Lawrence. You know, I think other administrations have had to go through this balancing act in the past. Like, is there anything different about, you know, this administration than prior administrations? Like, you know, what is?
I think the one thing that I'll say is when I got here, I did specifically, departments would tell me that they felt like they lacked the guidance and training on how to sort of handle and manage these individual decisions. And so that was something that we did very early on and is ongoing, is making sure that we, as a centralized people operations cabinet, are giving our departments that guidance and support and resources, frankly, that they need to do this work, because it includes reviewing every job description across the city, as well as really thinking about training and hiring, and we're a very large workforce, and each individual department has maybe 1 to 2 HR staff that manage really a ton of complicated work. So I would say the approach that we're taking is really figuring out how do we support our departments, giving them and training them in policies and procedures. Okay, so just one quick follow-up, in terms of, so I mean, do you prefer this being like a case-by-case basis, or do you know, in terms of, obviously your job would be easier if it was just block rules, but so
you know, how should this work?
It's a great question, and it's both and I don't want to get like too deep into the philosophy of policy making here, but you know, like, it is incredibly important that we give people guidelines and standard operating procedures, and also in sort of work that are about people, it is always going to be a little bit more complicated and gray area, which is why we always strive for policies and procedures that balance those two things, that give people the guidance that they need while allowing them to sort of understand individual circumstances. So like, my question is, it depends. It's not, if we leave it to being a completely like, manager, just figure it out, here's the guidance, use your discretion, you end up with systemic biases playing a massive role. And if you create a really hard line, then you like, if the like, this is the most lenient we are and this is the most strict, the more sort of a hatchet of a policy you make, the closer towards sort of strict you're going to have to run. So I don't know if I just said anything that made sense, but at a high level, it's really that balancing act of making sure that we are giving the opportunity for individual nuance to have a role while giving people enough guidance so that their individual biases don't come into decision making.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilor Coletta Zapata, you're going to have 6 minutes, and then I'm going to go to the sponsors. They have a last quick round, maybe like 2 minutes, but and then we'll move on to the second panel.
Sounds good.
So 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and I want to thank you all so much for your work. Chief Masso, it's good to see you. Lou, I'm just forgetting your title, I'm sorry, but thank you for being here. Lou.
It's not that important.
Chief Lawrence, thank you for your work. I have seen what you've been able to do in your dedication to the city, coming back to the city from the private sector to help build out various systems and structures within the people cabinet. And in addition to that, what you've been able to do in various departments, because that was something that we had heard over the last 8 years of that, you know, the fact that people didn't feel like they had the right training within their various departments. And that's been something that you've been able to provide, so I appreciate it. I apologize for being late. I'm so sorry. I have been doing my best to try to listen in, and I apologize if some of my questions are redundant. But before I get into the question that I have, I think it's always a priority. It's been my priority in conversations with the private sector to at least let folks know that as a city, we are leaning into providing second chances to people who deserve to share in the economic prosperity of the city, especially if they themselves have demonstrated a commitment to serving their residents. And I think that is something that maybe we all share, but that's been a priority of mine in conversations with Verizon and Comcast and other people trying to do business here in the city of Boston. Even seeking work within the city and wanting to be involved in public service speaks a lot to an individual's character. So I just wanted to call that out. As long as people are dedicated to the future of the city, I think that they deserve to demonstrate that. My understanding, at least for maybe Alex, is that when somebody is going through, whatever crisis they are in their lives when they're younger, they're 18, and their records are sealed, or they might have gotten something expunged, is that something that we are able to see at all? Do we take that into consideration? And then, what sort of, and I apologize, this may be redundant, but beyond compliance with CORI reforms, I guess, what are the proactive strategies that you're doing in the Office of Returning Citizens to support the recruitment and retention of folks who have been able to demonstrate this commitment to the city?
Yeah, so I think that one thing I'll just say on your first question is, in addition to us taking the nature of which kinds of charges we're able to see, there are a number of charges that might exist that we aren't able to see as an employer, again, because of the hard work and advocacy that many of the folks in this room have done in terms of criminal justice reform and ensuring that certain things like charges that happen in youth or that have been dismissed do not appear on record. So it is quite frequent that what we're able to see as an employer might not exist, not include everything that has ever happened in someone's life. But Jose, or Chief Mosso, I'll turn it to you to answer the second half.
Yeah, and so on behalf of with the Office of Returning Citizens and leadership of Director Montgomery has been doing is, continue to advocate both in building relationships with outside employers to really be able to assess a pipeline for the individuals that come through their office. In addition, education. A lot of these employers don't know or have a stigma or just like a perception of the individuals in which they're bringing on, and so how to be able to break that down. Additionally, they provide training opportunities, a soft skills approach, and if there's anything beyond their capabilities, what they've been able to do is outsource to outside organizations, many of which President Louis Jean had mentioned, that have this particular skill sets led by formerly incarcerated individuals who are able to better support in ways in which are beyond our capacity. But for the most part, they've been able to really incorporate what it is that you need to be successful in these roles through case management, through ongoing touch bases, through tracking and seeing how long people have been employed, and really recognizing that we line it up with the timeline for reducing recidivism, right? Recognizing that the first 90 days are critically important, right? And then go beyond that 3 years. And so like the risk goes down as the time goes longer. But again, we're naming something as a second chance city, right? Where you had mentioned about, records being expunged, et cetera. Like Larry Miller, for example. This is an individual who head up Jordan Brand, who was charged for murder, as a young man, as a teenager, going on to be successful as leader in his respective work. We think locally, a lot of organizations that we have locally would not exist if it wasn't for second chances. Teen empowerment, New Beginnings reentry, Power Corps, like many others that I'm not even mentioning would not exist if it wasn't for second chances and the individuals who are leading these organizations as well, right? So it's critically important that we put names to things because people, I think, talking abstract, but what we're not recognizing is that many people that we come across have prior offenses, and to President's point that we are not the worst. We are not the worst we've ever done, right? And so we're just really recognizing that aspect of it at all, and just accepting people for who they are and what it is that they bring to the table.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your work. That's all I have. My questions are taken. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. So we've got two of the docket sponsors here. I don't know if quick follow-up. I'm going to limit it to 2 minutes if that works. Councilor Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do we periodically review any CORI records throughout the year to see if there's any new arrest on city employees?
So that depends on the union that the employee is a part of. So some of that is governed in specific collective bargaining contracts. If a position, if we promote an individual and the new position requires a CORI or a SORI, we'll run it at that point.
What about for non-union positions? Do we do that?
We don't have a regular process to rerun all positions. Again, it would happen at the time of promotion.
There would be nothing that could preclude that from taking place.
No, we could. That could be it could be a policy we would have.
If an employee is arrested while they're a city employee, are they formally required to notify their supervisor or human resources point of contact?
They are not required to do so, no. And in fact, we are legally we are not allowed to ask them, but we are allowed to find out if we are made aware.
So if there's a serious offense that a city employee was arrested for, they don't have an obligation to report that arrest?
I don't think that they are legally required to tell us that they were arrested.
Okay. I do think there should be a policy of anyone that is arrested should notify their human resources point of contact, including here at the city council, should be captured here as well. If anyone is arrested, any city employee, including city councilors or city council point of central staff or staff, they should notify their human resources contact. I do think it could have a potential impact on city business. It could have an impact on public safety. And I think in the interest of transparency, I would recommend that that be a new policy to ensure that we are accountable to the residents of Boston. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. Councilor Murphy, we're just doing a quick final round for sponsors, 2 minutes, if you have anything else.
No other questions, just one follow-up, Alex, on that answer when you said you can't ask, but you can look. Can you look without being told? Like, can you just randomly, or is that a violation of people's privacy? Like, can you randomly run names? Is that against the law to check if any, arrests come up that match? Because oftentimes I feel like in this world of constant social media everyone's business unfortunately seems to be out there in the public anyway, and we often find out because someone else decided to share it or it's been shared in a public forum. Do you have to act on it if you see it in a public forum then that or can you also act on it without having publicly been told if you just had a hunch or something?
So what I would say is if we come to know that an employee has been arrested, of course, we're going to look into those circumstances, and then we're going to take whatever action is appropriate, given the details of both what their job is and what we know about that arrest. That might include placing them on leave, paid or unpaid, again, sort of depending on some of the circumstances and depending on whether or not they're in a union, and then we'll take action accordingly. Lou, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, Councilor, the thing that I would add here, and it's not something we talked about in the process of implementing CORI, where we're obligated to deal with the effects or the impacts of the policy on our current workforce. One of the things the unions often want to do is contest the accuracy of the CORI. Is it accurate? Mm-hmm. Does it actually capture what happened? That's particularly true if you're going further back in time, So there's an awful lot that goes into how we would deal with this in terms of the bargaining obligations with our current employees. There's just a lot to think through, and it's,
An individual can check their CORI, though, like a credit check for accuracy, true? Like to make sure that, and I would assume we can hear more from the Office of Returning Citizens. They must do a lot of support with that, but I would think you would want to check your own to make sure it's accurate.
That certainly is something, I will confine it to what I know to be true. Mm-hmm. That is certainly something that our unions have asked for the right to do on behalf of people who are already here.
That's good. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councilor Mejia? You are I have you down as a sponsor on docket number 323. If you got any follow-up questions?
Find out I got upgraded, like Beyonce here. I do believe, right, in the question regarding kind of like tracking, I think it would be really helpful, more on the promotional aspects of things. Like, I'm really interested in kind of what that looks like. So I don't have a follow-up question. I just want to go again and urge us to really start thinking about those steps and ladders that we all trying to climb up in here, and how we help support our returning citizens really thrive. I know that this is not why we ended up in this public hearing to begin with, but I am interested in knowing a little bit more, and I want to know which one I sponsored. But I appreciate the additional time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Mejia. Okay, so that's going to wrap up our testimony from the first panel. I really want to thank you for coming in today and answering questions. Maybe even more so than other hearings, I do urge you to stick around, because we're going to hear from advocates who often do an incredible job explaining, some, what we can do better, and maybe some of the, errors that we're making in just terms of how we're thinking about this issue. So I urge you to stick around and hear from the panelists. I assume nobody has anything else they want to add. So thank you very much. This panel is, I don't know, dismissed, or but hopefully stick around. So I don't know if we have the advocate panel here. If you want to step up, thank you very much. I've got Mac Hudson and Aaron Manning and Matteo Filippo. Am I pronouncing that right? Filippi, sorry. And then for anyone who is going to, for public testimony, we'll take that after this panel. Oh, it's the same people. Okay, great. Okay, good. So we're joined, Mac Hudson, Community Liaison and Paralegal for Racial Equity and Corrections Initiative, is that right? And Prisoners Legal Services of Massachusetts. We have Aaron Manning, who's the Executive Director of Project Place. Does I have that right?
You got it?
Okay, and Matteo Filippi, I apologize. Boston Project you're the chairman of the board for Boston Project Rebound. Is that correct?
Yes, and I'm also representing Full Gospel Businessmen's Fellowship, which is also, we do a lot of work with returning citizens. They're kind of interconnected. We're community partners together. So you're correct.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I don't know if I'll leave it to you to make any statements you want. We're going to start with Mr. Hudson, if you want to start. If you have anything you'd like to say, you heard, if you got anything prepared, great. If not, if you want to just react to what you've been hearing for the last hour and a half,
Sure.
we'd love to hear your thoughts.
I think there was a lot to react to. I do think, and I just wanted to kind of just start off by saying that I understand that this subject matter is much broader and complicated, but I do want to make sure that folks appreciate the real challenges that returning citizens are facing when they come back into society, right? And real questions around how do we support everyone that's coming back through here, right? And so I do, just to kind of like touch a little bit on, I think when someone is sentenced, in that sentence is really outlined what the punishment is for that crime. And then when someone is done with serving that time, they should no longer be restricted if we're talking about true second chances, right? Mm-hmm. So the second chance really relies on not our own personal interpretation, but what the state has already laid down and mandated, right? So I shouldn't be experiencing any other biases as a result of that. But I should be able to come out and, as a citizen, contribute and to support my family and to support others. And so I think that when we talk in context of what policy should look like, we have to be reminded that there is already a process set in stage, in most of which I think we complicate by trying to add other things, other dimensions to it, right? And then it takes away from the true understanding of, do I ever stop serving my time, right? And I think that's a real question for most folks. I love what Ed Flynn said, Councilor Ed Flynn said about the fact that when folks come out, we are not, well, the real question is, how do you support them? But I look at what's already been done and what we can do better, right? I don't think by encumbering more policies that's going to restrict, is going to actually help the issue. But if someone gets a job, just for one example, someone gets a job, they've shown that they're qualified to get that job, and they're performing on that job, excellent. I think it's almost arbitrary to then say, once they get the CORI, like CORI comes back to say, well, we have to fire you based on that. And then it's like, where does that person ever fit in? You know, is this person part of society or they're not part of society? And I think that that's what raises the real question for a lot of the challenges.
Yeah, thank you. And okay, Ms. Manning, and I guess in terms of, educating us about what it is like for somebody who is, returning, and how, the obstacles that they're facing, in terms of, like, if you have any stories or, data, I think, I would love to, learn about this more. So just kind of describing what it is like, and the obstacles people are facing, and if, how many people are actually, they qualify for the job, and then they find out, well, you've had this thing from 10 years ago, and we're not, we don't want you here, and how that, the cascading effects that has on a person's life. So anyway, whatever you want to say is great. I just thought I'd bring that up.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here. I'm excited to be a part of the conversation. And, I was listening to the first panel and thinking like, oh, maybe we should have gone first, but it's also really helpful to hear your questions, which are nuanced as the topic. And I'll try to kind of incorporate some of my thoughts with, 15 years of experience in the field into that. But I do want to just kind of review the organization that I work for and the services, because I think that's also important, and talks a little bit about the way in which I look at supporting individuals returning to the community from incarceration. So my name is Erin Manning. I'm the executive director at Project Place. If you don't know the organization, for the last 58 years, we've been serving individuals experiencing homelessness and poverty in the South End of Boston. And one of the subgroups that we work very deeply with is individuals returning to the community from incarceration. And so the way in which Project Place does that is actually to start our programming and services behind the wall. And so we have a partnership with the Suffolk County House of Correction, and we actually go behind the wall on both the men's and women's side. And we work one-on-one and in group format with individuals who are preparing to return to community. And I think that's really important, because a successful return starts while folks are behind the wall. And so, and that's at least what we believe at Project Place. And so really going behind the wall and providing those services. Obviously, we can't meet everyone who's returning to Boston behind the wall. And so we also work closely with parole and probation to meet people when they are back in the community. And there's a lot of really important factors that I think are important to think about when someone is returning to the community. And I think Mac really touched on what my amazing director of Reentry Services, Beth Carter, calls an individual second sentence, right? And so I'd like to bring like a little bit of that to this group and then talk a little bit more about what we see on the employment side of things. I think that was the focus of what we were brought to speak about today. And I think, part of that was in question on the first panel. And what I really want to focus on is access to opportunity. So while we can talk about someone's level in terms of their CORI or in terms of specifically a sex offense, right? After 15 years of doing this work, what I would say really indicates whether or not someone will reoffend or recidivate is going to be the access for opportunity that they have, and employment is a very critical one of those, along with the support network that they're going to have, and housing opportunities. I think those are three really key important elements of it. And I think some of the best practices that Project Place employs and utilizes to lift up our returning citizens is first, we have individualized support services. So every single person who has a CORI or a background has a different story to tell around it, and there was a situation that led to that. And so the response needs to be different for each of them. For some of them, there's going to be a need for substance use disorder services, mental health services. Some folks are actually going to need access to tools and training to be able to seek employment. Other folks are going to need access to digital literacy skills. It looks different depending on the individual, but what we do know is that they need individualized support services, and they need to be holistic and relationship-based. And so my team works very hard to meet the individuals who cross our threshold, who are motivated to gain employment, to understand what their needs are, to build a relationship with them, and then to support them as they return to the community. The other thing that is really, really critical is access to training and skill development. Many of the clients that cross the threshold at Project Place, their first permanent employment outside of our organization may be the first job that they've had, may be the first job that they've held in 10 years, but we know that they're going to have significant gaps, and that in order for them to be successful, they need robust training, and they need to develop skills that are going to challenge the barriers that they're facing to employment and make them more employable. Sometimes that looks like industry credentials. I would say like at a most basic level, it looks like digital literacy and workforce development training. We also know that we need to provide these individuals with access to livable wages. That's incredibly important. We have to think about how we are incentivizing individuals to work and to change behaviors, right? And so if doors are constantly being closed for them, if they do not have access to stable housing, and if they are not able to be financially independent, what kind of message are we sending them? And thinking back towards that kind of like ongoing sentence once they've returned to the community, and they should be able to have that second chance. And I really, I'm sure in this chamber you talk about housing all the time because it's such a need for the city of Boston. But just like there are additional obstacles to gaining employment for individuals who are just as impacted, there are also really negative ramifications of that towards housing. And so that creates another constant struggle for the individuals and a pain point and a pressure point for the individuals we serve. So those are some of the best practices that I think we really have to think about. I'd love to just bring an individual named Tito into the room just to give you a picture of like what this can look like and who these individuals are. I think one of the challenges I was having listening to the first panel is when we categorize someone by the level or the nature of the charges, there's a lot behind that we don't know. And so I'd like to bring Tito into the room because the individuals that walk through the doors of Project Place are beautiful. They are beautiful humans. Have they made mistakes? Absolutely. Have they grown from them and learned? Hopefully. And I think how we support that growth and development is really important. So Project Place is a member of the Coalition for Homeless Individuals, and I had the opportunity to spend a full day with Tito on the Hill, at Capitol Hill, speaking to our representatives at the state level. And within 10 minutes, I was like, Tito, what's up? You're like the most employable person I've ever met. Why are you at Project Place? What's going on? Let's talk. And as I find many individuals who are justice impacted, he was very willing to be transparent with me and talk to me about some of the struggles he had faced. And so this is an individual who had come to Massachusetts. He has a young family, and in his mid-30s, found out that he had a highly addictive personality through overuse of alcohol, which was a slippery slope and led to a substance use disorder, which led to him, for the first time in his life, in his mid-30s, being incarcerated and having a criminal record. And so he had come to Project Place. He was living in a substance use disorder community, and he was getting access to the services and support he needed there. And he had a strong work history, which is very different than many of the clients that we work to support at Project Place. But he also recognized that he had an open case and that now he had a criminal record, and that his access to employment was going to look very different than it had previously. So while he had done the work and gained the supports and the substance use and mental health services that he needed to be successful moving forward, he knew he wasn't going to be able to just apply for jobs and be successful gaining employment. And so he partnered with Project Place. He went through our workforce development programming. He got access to digital literacy support, and he was working in one of the two businesses that we operate that actually offers transitional employment to our clients. And that's a really critical component of the Project Place community that I think makes us different than other service providers, is that we take things beyond the classroom and we actually hire the individuals that we're working with, and we offer them transitional employment so that they can take their learnings from the classroom into the field, gain a paycheck, practice the skills that we've been talking about in an environment where they make mistakes, because we all make mistakes, right? They can be teachable opportunities. One of the biggest challenges for folks returning to the community is one, when they get a no for a position that they're qualified for because of a background, and how that de-incentivizes them from continuing that job search, right? But two is when they aren't able to access previous work that they've had before, or are able to because that has changed. And so they need the opportunity to go into a learning environment, make mistakes, and then not make them once they're on the job, because we know that if they secure employment and they work for 30 days and they lose the job and they have a negative experience, their chances of recidivating are much higher than if they're successful when they return to that permanent employment. And so Tito was working in one of the two small businesses that we operate at Project Place. And it took him over 6 months of working with our organization to be able to secure employment. And he was working every day, applying for jobs with a team of individuals who are trained in this, working behind him. I'm happy to report that he was able to secure employment. He's making over the livable wage. And that is the type of success I know that all of our returning citizens can have if they have the proper support network behind them. And I think, a city that is investing in them and seeing them as a potential workforce, and that's really, really critical as well. I know you all have a lot of questions, so I'll turn it over to my counterparts.
Mr. Filippi, yeah. Yes. Yeah. Well, I think we'll take care of it. Yeah.
Okay, got it. I echo everything that my colleagues have said, and Aaron, I'm not going to add to what you said, because 100% kudos to everything. What I will talk about is more my experience on the ground, both with Boston Project Rebound and with Full Gospel Businessmen's Fellowship of Greater Boston. Boston Project Rebound connects people to other organizations, partner organizations, and resources when they come out. And what Full Gospel does is we pick up the other piece, which is developing relationships. Developing mentoring relationships is extremely important to finding a place where people can actually work through their issues and work through within a community, just like AA does. It's a bunch of folks that are really trying to make it out in the world. And we have sex offenders, some of them level 3, some of them level 2s. We have a lot of addicts that come through our doors, and through these relationships, we've come to know and learn an awful lot over the years of working with them. One example, to what you were speaking about this morning. We had a level 2 that came through. He had been working for a company for 4 years, a private sector company for 4 years. And after 4 years, someone had said, they never asked for a CORI, they never asked for anything. Someone had said after the 4 years to the manager, this person has a sex offense, and they just let him go without explanation. And the difficulty was, yeah, is it legal, is it not? How much attention do they want to bring to themselves by taking it to court? There's a lot of issues involved in that because there's a lot of emotions involved in that. So on that level, there's some challenge there. And his crime was 20 years ago, no longer on supervision, had already gone through all his programs, and was working at that place for 4 years with excellent results. We have a guy that came out after 43 years. He was 17 when he committed his crime. It was a murder, a bar fight that had gone bad, and he had come out, and one of his difficulties is learning technology. Can you think in 1979, someone going into prison and then coming out into the world that we live in today? It's extremely difficult to try to work a smartphone, to work a computer. How do you do a resume now? How do you apply online? How do I remember my passwords? I bought him a computer. I sat down with him, and I've been working with him and trying to. These mentoring relationships make all the difference in the world to a lot of these people coming out. And it's the relationships that seem to prevent recidivism more than anything else. Mm-hmm. The relationships, not the policies, but it's the relationships that we build. When it comes to level 3s, one of the things that I've discovered or I've learned is that different people have different experiences and why they're labeled a level 3. Some of them come out as a level 2. They might have a technical violation, and because of the technical violation, it goes in as recidivism, and then they come back out, and then they're labeled a level 3 now because there was a violation. So there's different reasons why people are level 3s. There's mental health issues that sometimes come into play. But one thing that I've noticed about most sex offenses is that there's isolation behaviors that often are at the root of why they commit sex offenses. And the isolation behaviors are contributed to when they come out into a society where they can't find housing and they can't find work. And they continue to be rejected by society and not funneled into a place where they can find meaningful work. A lot of these guys have been abused themselves, and it's perpetuating a cycle. And they need to break that cycle somehow by finding hope. Without hope, a person's dangerous. And with hope, they're not dangerous. So if we're really considering the safety of a community, we do the best we can to try to make levels, but it's not the end-all, be-all. I think every individual has something to offer. We just have to take each individual as an individual and the reasons why things have happened and what they're doing now, rather than just pigeonholing them into this defines you. And that makes a huge difference, at least in the experience that I have with the people that I work with.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to start. I'm making 5 minutes for this. We'll come back if there's follow-up questions. Starting with you, Councilor Flynn.
Thank you to the panelists for the important work you're doing. I had the opportunity to work with Project Place for many years as a probation officer and respect the work that they're doing. So I want to say thank you to Ms. Manning. Mac, thank you and Mateo, thank you for your comments and your important work. And Mac, we talked at the beginning. I asked Councilor Mejia, I said, is there someone that you know in the Office of Returning Citizens, someone that does excellent work in that field, really? And she recommended you, so I want to say thank you for being here and for what you're doing. We talked about a person that would be hired and that was doing a good job in a warehouse and doing an excellent job. He was showing up for work every day, on time, being professional. And then the CORI would come back, and that person would be brought before the boss and said, I'm sorry, we have to let you go because of the CORI. So the proposal under Governor Patrick banned the box. So you couldn't ask a person at the beginning if you had a CORI, but you could conduct a CORI after the fact when the person is hired. But I just want to make 2 points and I ask you to respond. The person that would ultimately get fired was very discouraged, knowing that he was doing the best he possibly could. And sometimes that person would go back into a life of crime, unfortunately. But what is the next step if we want to give that person the opportunity to continue working and they're doing a good job? What could possibly be the next step following up on kind of Governor Patrick's reform?
Well, I think that's the reason why I raised the legislative issue, is because generally when you come back out, if a crime is not related to the industry that a person committed, for example, right? Like larceny of a bank, something like that, where it might plays a role in whether or not that person should be in that particular position, then it becomes an issue of just really, in my mind, just having the scarlet letter on the person. So if we're going to move the conversation forward, then we have to kind of look at real policies that will not allow folks to be judged on the basis of that, right? If we're talking about real second chances. For example, I did 33 years incarcerated. I work with a bunch of folks who are similarly impacted. The most real challenges they have is not really getting into the positions, but holding those positions after the fact. But their crimes were unrelated. Drug dealers, maybe got caught with a gun or what have you. And what does that have to do with a warehouse job, right? Like this, it's unrelated. And so I think that if we're talking about moving it, we need to look at why are they even allowed to, look at these instances in the first place, and for what positions. And I would strongly urge if there's some policy creation, maybe it's in and around that specific, I think. But yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Wasn't there an initiative where you can look back, whether it's 5 years or 7 years, and maybe making a change instead of looking back 5 or 7 years, maybe it would be 10 years? I don't exactly have the number of years correct, but is that something that's being talked about that you have heard?
I know previously CORI did look back at 10 years. I think under the new Deval Patrick's passage of that, in the city of Boston's passage, it was limited to I think 5 years.
Yeah,
now.
right.
But I mean, I think for me, it really comes down to what a person is applying for. If you might have concerns with a sex offender going into a public school trying to apply for a job. I think that's a legitimate concern that would be held. But how do we, when we start just using it as a blanket form to deny every economic opportunity to an individual, then I think that now we're getting into a place where we're penalizing them based on something that they say it's already served, a sentence that's already served. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I think the most, and I agree with you, I think the most discouraging thing I worked on as a probation officer is working with someone to get a job. They're doing the job well, and then when they do, then the CORI comes back and they get fired, they get laid off or fired, and then they would come back to the probation officer upset, discouraged, and almost out of options at that point. And when someone's out of options, unfortunately, they could go back to a life of crime. Sure. So, how do we work with that person to support them, especially when we know that they are doing their best, they serve their sentence. It's not a sex crime, they're not a level 3 sex offender, but they serve their time and they want to make a meaningful contribution. 99% of people in jail or in prison come back to the community, And we need people to come back to the community that have skills and the opportunity to get into employment and training so that they can raise their family and live a happy and healthy life. I think that's the goal, but I think there's more work we need to do on CORI reform. And I always mention Governor Patrick because I always liked Governor Patrick. I always thought that was his best initiative that he did on CORI reform. But I do think there's more work we could do on CORI reform. I think I'm out of time on this first round. Mr. Chair, thank you for giving me an extra couple minutes.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Braden, 5 minutes.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here. I come in, I'm learning a lot. Thank you so much. And you know, the way you have sort of preconceived notions about, oh, this is the way you need to do it, but I think you've opened my thinking about how the challenges and also the notion that, you know, someone can, formerly incarcerated, can get a job, be doing a great job for 4 years, and then bang, somebody finds out they've got a record, and then they're out the door. It's not very just. So, and questions about. I come from Northern Ireland, and you know, I think a lot of our, this is my background, like just thinking about a lot of our folks that were incarcerated for political reasons in Northern Ireland, but the one thing we had was a very robust program of education, so people were doing law degrees and getting job training. I think that's part of the notion that there's this notion we lock people up, we throw the key away and forget about them for 20 years or whatever, without ever thinking about how we're going to about re-entry and getting them back into the community. Is there much work being done, like as you said, behind the wall before people come out from behind the wall? How much work is being done to, you know, get good job training and opportunities coming back? Like, I also feel the other great injustice we have is that in many cases our incarcerated population they do work behind the wall, but they don't get to put some of it in an escrow account that they can take with them when they come out the door. Right. And so they're coming out with nothing. And other folks, businesses in other parts, it's maybe more in the south, but certainly businesses are benefiting from that unpaid labour of prisoners. So again, I'm just thinking, how well do we do in terms of that rehabilitation process in Massachusetts?
Well, right now, I can speak that are there training opportunities that exist behind the wall? Yes. Who gets access to those is a whole nother different subject. When we talk in terms of Black and brown folks' experiences incarceration, you know, presently there's a bill being presented to collect racial data because they're not getting their entitlements behind the wall. You know, not basic fundamental training, including the ID that's been passed by the governor. Still folks are coming home and they still don't have their IDs or license. So these are real life challenges that folks are being presented, you know, as we speak today. There's a step down process in which you're supposed to experience in the Department of Corrections, which goes from high security, medium, and then pre-release, minimum, then pre-release. The point of that is to acclimate you into so that you adjust as you go along, but also when you get to minimum and pre-release, it's to give you an opportunity to earn money so that you be prepared to come out here and perhaps actually buy housing or rent an apartment if you need be. But Black and brown folks don't never see those lower security levels at an alarming rate, which is the reason why there's pending legislation asking for meaningful oversight of the Department of Corrections, including racial data, so that we can determine who's getting access to those. So those are the real life challenges. Do they exist? Are things are being passed and does training exist behind the wall? Yes, but who's getting access to those remains a real problem.
Thank you. And then in terms of the support network, like, I think I'd love you to speak more about that, and also, you know, the mentors or folks who have maybe been formerly incarcerated or back, and making a go of it, but then also what's all in the package when you're in a support network?
Well, one of the things that we first do, we're often contacted by the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department, and I have initial meetings with people that they choose to connect with us when they get out. And sometimes we will meet them as they come out right out of the door. We'll give them a ride wherever they need to be. Sometimes we're contacted by the group that's giving them the ride and said, hey, we got a guy here, and he needs some help finding housing. So we're not really a housing provider, but we will connect them to Boston Project Rebound and the resources that are there, and organizations like yours and others. There's some faith-based residential programs, depending on what their needs are. But the big piece is with the relationships. When they do go through those discouraging moments, there's only so much that a state agency can do to help build their self-esteem and build their encouragement. When a person is released, and again, this is state level, not city level, so I don't know how much jurisdiction the city would have over this, but you're basically released with what amounts to slippers, jeans, and a sweatshirt. And so one of the first things I do when I meet somebody coming out is I'll meet them usually at Downtown Crossing. When I leave here, I'm going to meet another one down there to help him out. And how are you going to apply for a job looking like that? You know, it's not going to be easy to do. And you go to a secondhand store, and oftentimes you can't really find a decent fitting outfit to go to an interview with. So what we do is I try to coordinate different people. Today it happens to be me. I'll take them through, say, Primark, and we'll buy them about $100 worth of clothes. And while we're walking through the store, we talk to them, get to know a little about them. And as I do, one of the things that I do without telling them you should be doing this, because they'll never respond to that, I'll ask them, hey, have you considered an outfit for an interview? Oh, I never thought of that. So the questions that we ask them can help lead them a little bit into how they should be thinking when they get out, because you're overwhelmed, especially if you've done any significant time. And that feeling of being overwhelmed, emotions have a huge impact on where they end up.
Yeah.
You know, emotions, their inability to deal with emotions is why a lot of them end up inside to begin with. So having that community supporting them. I had a recent opportunity to speak at Suffolk University to the law school on a panel. And while I was speaking, a text came in from one of the guys I met a couple of days before. I always follow up a couple of days afterwards. How are the clothes fit? How are you doing in the house that you're in, whatever it is, or the shelter you're in? Can we get together and do a resume with you? Maybe we could work on something and talk about what the next steps are. Well, this particular guy sent me a text right in the middle of that talk and said, Mateo, when we walked and started talking when we were walking through the store, he said, nobody ever talked to me like they believed in me, like you did. He said, I really believe I can do this thing because of that. And that just blew my mind, and I was able to share it with them. That relationship makes more of a difference than anything else does. So I try to coordinate that. We also have a support group online for guys that can't really move around too much. So every Monday night, we have a support group for the general area, the greater Boston area, and guys come on, and it's a structured meeting. We have some structure, we have some teaching, we talk a lot about addiction, because almost everybody that's gone in has some sort of an addiction issue. Yeah. And so we spend a lot of time on that. But if any man's in crisis, the group is there to support him in his crisis. And a lot of the guys that have done time will share what they've learned. And it's amazing to see how the emotions just deflate. Yeah. And now they believe they can do it. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. And I'm well over my time, but thank you. And thank you all for sharing your work, and thank you for the work you do. It's very, very important. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Braden. Councillor Murphy?
Thank you for taking the time to share that story, because I do believe, you know, that is what makes the difference, and all of you do such important work, God's work. And I know there's really no, answer to this question, but like when do you ever get to move on, right? And that's what you're working with day in, right, and day out of people. We invest here in this body and, nonprofits, and supporting workforce development. And I know I've been to the Suffolk County for NCAT graduations, and learning skills so that when you do get out, and we know you will get out, these are skills to help find, a job that will pay well or something that you're interested in. But then many times they must know it's just hanging over their head that even if they have the skills to apply to a job and they get that job, it must be terrifying that you're just kind of waiting, right? Yeah. For somebody maybe to find out. And so how do we change that policy that if we really do believe that you have paid your debt to society, that, and I get that the CORI switch, and it was asked earlier, like we can't ask them at the beginning, so we can get their hopes up and they go through the process. But can we have a conversation, I don't know, that says, well, you saw the required, screenings, or, we will check if it gets to the point where we're offering you a job, but are there crimes, that maybe someone had committed in the past that would allow them to stay? So I know we can't talk about individual situations, but if we find out years in that someone who has spent time in jail and now is doing a really good job at the job they've had, maybe for years, but it's come to our attention that they're, in the extreme case, a level 3 sex offender, or in, not as extreme cases, are we able to, or should we be able to, do you think, maybe not fire them, but shift them to a job that may not violate? Because what I heard earlier from the first panel is not all jobs would have that requirement of the screening. So do you agree that, us as a city, because we can only control the hiring, practices here, that if you are showing up and you're doing a good job, and because it's almost like, who's the unlucky one? And you're not going to rat out other people, but you must know other people who also just haven't gotten caught yet. So I just don't see the fairness there, that it's only because we found out, and it doesn't mean that we've checked everyone. So I don't know, it's really more just deep thoughts I'm having. And just if you had any thoughts about how do we, support more and step in and maybe say, okay, fine, I agree, this isn't the place for you, but there are so many other unfilled jobs here in the city that that may be better for you.
Yeah, I have some thoughts and then I'll turn it over. I'm sure we'll do. I think one thing that the city can do, and obviously Chief Lawrence seems like she really understands people work. So, you have a wonderful leader at this, and I think, Mayor Wu's administration looks at things that are nuanced, which is very helpful. I think one of the things we should really consider is looking beyond the charges and looking at what's happened since, right? And so some things that my team and I look at when we're thinking about the success of an individual and if they have the services that they need is like looking at, are their basic needs being met, right? What has their work product and their work history looked like for you? Are they on time? Do they have relationships with their coworkers? How is their performance looking? I think that's going to be really indicative. I think the other thing that we look at is, what resources are they looking for and do they have in place? And that's going to be really important. As an employer, that's very challenging, right? Because from an HR perspective, I'm also an employer, right? I have 38 staff. So from an HR perspective, it can be really challenging because those are lines you can't cross legally, right? Mm-hmm. But I think that it's about a temperament. It's about an understanding. It's about thinking about this being more than just a black and white situation where someone comes out with a certain charge that they're essentially never going to be able to walk away from unless we change that narrative, unless we say like, okay, they did their time. We're going to trust that what was advised as being that time has allowed that to be addressed. And now they are here, they're showing up every day, they're working, they have, and thinking about, because they're, from my understanding legally, as employers, we have the ability to think about whether or not we act when a CORI comes back 4 years down the road, or something new about someone's history comes up. And so, like, yes, we have policies in place that guide that, right? And I think those are important, and Chief Lawrence referenced that. But we don't have to act on that. We can say, like, I'm actually going to value their last 4 years of experience and performance over that charge. That was 20 years in the past. And as a city, I think we could incentivize businesses doing that and employers doing that.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. I know the buzzer went off, and maybe other colleagues will ask similar questions, but thank you for the work you do. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Murphy. Councilor Mejia, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
It's good to see y'all. And I'm this is the panel that I think, in my mind, and from a place of process, to have you all go first to help set the stage, and then the administration, because I think there's just so much wisdom, right, that we can all lean into and learn from. So thank you for sharing so much of yourselves in the space and the work. And a special shout out to Mac. I've seen you out in these streets. I know how hard you go for the community, and I want to thank Councilor Flynn for inviting you to be a panelist here today. I think a lot of this work is informed by people who are doing the work and or living the realities, right? That's when we know better, we do better. And I guess, one of the things that I have top of mind is really looking at the role that the city can play to strengthen its relationships, to support job seekers. Just because I know that there are a lot of organizations, people end up starting their own nonprofit organizations, MAC, and they take matters into their own hands, right? And that is definitely a pathway to financial freedom and to sustain, because when people are living their purpose, they're more likely to succeed. Mm-hmm. And while I do appreciate jobs for the sake of occupying a paycheck, I'm more invested in things that are long-term and more sustainable. Mm-hmm. And there is a question here. I'm just going to give me a minute to get to it. So I used to work with women who were transitioning out of welfare for Goodwill, and my job was to help them find employment. And all of the employers, or at least the pathway was Dunkin' Donuts, Target, da 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 da. And I was like, no. So I started asking the women, what did you used to like to do when you were in high school? And then my mission was to help people find jobs that fulfill their purpose. Mm-hmm. And I'm proud to say that most of the women that graduated from my training program back in 2012 are still employed today. Mm-hmm. Because of the intentionality of placement. Mm-hmm. All of that said, can you talk to me a little bit more about real pathways for returning citizens, for our incarcerated loved ones who have come back ready to take control of their own lives? What does that look like, and what should we be investing in to support people find purposeful employment?
I'd love to take a stab at it.
Yeah.
I think education's probably number one. Mm-hmm. Being able to educate them, providing the kind of either job training or college degree opportunities, which is also another issue we never talked about today, is that some college degrees are just out of reach for people coming out, and getting that kind of an education. It seems like every higher paying job needs a bachelor's at least, sometimes, some cases, a master's. Mm-hmm. So education, access to education is absolutely huge in order to do that. And one of the things that I try to do, I am an educated person, I have a degree, and I have a graduate degree. And what I like to do with the guys on Monday night is I'll teach them how to manage their money. I'll talk to them about how money moves in a capitalist system, so where they can move and build a dream from a job to being self-employed and maybe being a business owner. Okay. Using the book, The Four Quadrants, it's just a fantastic space to do that, because we get this mindset that I only need a job, but I try to get folks to look at themselves as, you could also be a business owner.
Yeah.
You don't have to just have a job. What's your dream? And get them to talk about it. Because again, emotions are a motivator. And if they believe they can do it, they will.
So, from my experience, a lot of folks come out already with an idea what they want to do. It's about how do we support that, right? And with a degree aside, I think what we've seen is we take our life experience and we turn that into something to assist or advance others. And so from one of the things that we have as an initiative from Access Mass is called From Liabilities to Contributors, which takes those who formerly harmed their community and put them in positions where they're now strong contributors. But it's dealing with a group of individuals who want to do that work, who desire to do that work, right? And then now moving them into more trauma-informed, where they're the best knowers of that because they've seen both sides. It's how we make use of those life experiences that we then create paths for real economic growth in that sphere, in my opinion.
I appreciate that. And I know my time is up. Could I just, one little button? Thank you. So thank you for that. I think that we're not going to fix all the world's problems in one hearing, ever. But I just would like to affirm, right, that when I entered the world of workforce, I was a HIV and AIDS community health educator. And there were a lot of young people who were living around my way that they were selling weed, right? And I went up to the kids, I was like, yo, while you do your little thing, can you pass out 3 packs of condoms to the people for free? So they went from, you crazy lady, to like, oh, miss, can you bring, I included them in that process, because what happens is that we tend to throw away people, right? And I think that we also tend to qualify people based on their pedigree and their degrees, when in reality, everyone has value. And I think I know this is about CORI reform, but I think that should be part of the conversation, is that we see the whole person, not their CORI or not even their degree at this point, right? I think that the way we move here is very judgmental and elitist. And I think that these are the sort of conversations when you are coming back and you're trying to break into anything, you get a lot of walls, because we are not learning how to see the whole person. We just see half of their piece. So thank you for that, Councilor Weber, for allowing me to speak longer.
Okay, thank you. Councilor, Madam President Louis Jen.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to this panel. I think it's incredibly important to have folks here to remind us that our call and objective as government is to, I used the word before, people who are unconnected, and I think that's right. People who can't pick up a phone and call someone and ask them to get a job, and you all are doing that work, so I just want to thank you. I want to thank you, Matt, for all the work that you're doing behind the wall. I have had the pleasure, both in my personal capacity, and pleasure is the wrong word, opportunity, visit loved ones, and now in my capacity as an at-large counselor, visit residents who are behind the wall. And I know that you've done a lot of, and Erin, I love the spelling of your name, by the way.
Thank you.
It's a beautiful spelling. I love that you said that the employment opportunities have to begin behind the wall, but there are a lot of digital divides that exist, right? And I know, Mac, you've done a lot of work on this. Is there a role for us here to help with that? And who are the people who can help with that?
I think so, yes. And I think some of the work has already begun, and what we see where the Office of Returning Citizens has a training program that we can connect folks to, but there's other folks who are.
Is it a program that people can make use of behind the wall?
Not behind the wall when they get out. Behind the wall presents a great difficult, and I don't know how much influence other than to be able to say that we're in support of it. But I do think if having the discussion, why not call the commissioner and some of the superintendents down here to kind of talk about how the residents of Boston who are incarcerated therein, to see how they're supported in that way. I know that there is a conversation going on about this very subject with a few companies, Emilio and others who are trying to get in and stabilize the internet to bring it up to date so that they can actually have access to computers without being able to log on to the internet, so that they can get the experience of how to use the computer, how to understand the advancements of even the phones. It's something that I struggled with when I came home 3 years ago. So there is conversations going on about this subject, but I do think it would probably be a much louder conversation if, this body and others would, inquire into those questions with the department to make sure that its residents who are returning will, be ready.
The Department of Corrections?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I don't know if anybody else had anything they wanted to say, but we're elected officials, we're politicians. I wonder if you have any advice for us or caution us in terms of like how we talk about this work, how we make your lives harder or easier in how we talk about this work, the harm of sensationalization. How can we be better helpers to you in this work of trying to find employment opportunities for folks who are returning home from incarceration? I had not known prior to the prior panel that there was a 90-day, about probably the data behind the fact that you got to get people within that first 90 days. Yeah. And if you're able to get them employment opportunities within the first 90 days, the recidivism rate drops. And so I think that's really powerful. I'm going to pin it also, Mr. Chair. I have a question for the prior panel about how the overall Human Resources Office works with all of the different human resources departments in individual departments, and which departments have HR departments and which don't. I think that's important, especially for us. Important City Council, we're building out our HR office here in the city of Boston. We don't have anyone who does human resources, so I think that's important for us to consider. But back to my question, are there words of advice or guidance that you have for us as elected officials who are often put in the position of the public wants to, has questions or concerns about so-and-so person employing and working, and how the language or the opportunities that we should, that we can use to support the work that you're trying to do? Because I think it's important for us to sort of try to resist knee-jerk reactions. And can you help us figure out how we do that?
I hope we all get to answer this one. I think I would say two things. I have a whole list in front of me, but I'd say two things, and I'll follow up with your office. I think the first is help open doors for the partners who are doing this work. And I think at the city level, that's something you all can really, really do. Massachusetts has amazing organizations that are doing reentry work, and we should be leading this work nationwide. But we need help opening doors to employers and incentivizing them opening those doors to an untapped workforce. I meet with folks every day who are highly motivated and would be wonderful additions to the workforce, but they need the opportunity to get into it, and we have to incentivize that. And I think that that's something you could do at the city level as talent and different companies are coming to the city, having this conversation, saying it's important, and connecting those HR departments. I have a whole employment services team that would love to partner with the HR departments of businesses that have, and the city of Boston, which we do, thank you, that have those workforce needs and to fill those positions. The other thing I would say is, don't undercredit the really small things matter. So how do we get folks access to work documentation? That's like one of the first things our team does, but it takes up to 3 months for a lot of our clients. It's challenging. It's different per state. I think all of us have, gone to the RMV and had negative experiences, and that can just be too much for some of the folks that we're partnering with, honestly, unless they have an advocate to go with them. So I think really don't underestimate how some of those small things really, really make a difference in somebody's ability to secure employment. And then the next thing I would say is just humanize this. We're talking about people. We're talking about moms and dads and brothers and sisters, and they are people first and foremost. And I have the privilege to know their stories and hope to bring those into this room and other rooms. But and we should look at this from a sense of opportunity.
Thank you.
I have one thing to say, and it's a biblical reference. Treat others the way you'd want to be treated. If it were you on the other side, coming out, how would you want to be talked to? How would you want to be treated? And that covers all the above.
Yeah.
Well, I would say I agree with all what my colleagues said, but I think coming from where I come from, there is multitudes of stigmas that we're constantly fighting. And a lot of that is because most folks who care about this subject are really not informed, right? And so how do we get informed is by having these kind of discussions in the first place. But it takes more than just one. We have to engage the community in which who are most impacted. And I think that a lot of times we find ourselves left out of that discussion. So I thank you for asking that question, because we don't use words like for inmates. We don't use prisoner. We don't use words like felon to describe folks who are coming out. Instead we use incarcerees. These folks are there, not by their own will. So, and then when we talk about conditions, we got to understand that there is a whole picture here. What happens when they're in, what happened before they came in, what happened while they're there, and then what should be the response when they are out here with us, right? And I think if we take that holistic approach whenever we're having a conversation, I think it's not situating anyone different than every other citizen at that point, right? Because we're treating them like we're supposed to as citizens of this Commonwealth. But when we start dissecting and separating, and I think that leads to what I call the scarlet letter effect. And that turns everyone else, those who are impacted the most, on its head, because there is no buying that they are a part of something, they are constantly being rejected. And that is the experience when we talk about the impact of CORI and workforce and et cetera. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Madam President. We'll go for a second round here, I guess. I think the Council President's question sort of, just in terms of we've talked today about, we've got this sort of fact pattern that sort of puts all of these sort of what you're working on and, what as an employer is dealing with, I think, to the test. We're talking about somebody who, apparently is a level 3 sex offender and, has a city job, and how do we talk about that? I guess, did you have anything else you wanted to add, especially specifically as it is to, people with sex offenses on their record? Like, I guess, Aaron, you mentioned, look at everything else since then, but is there anything else you want to add? Because I was curious about that myself, so.
I think that I understand the concern around this topic, definitely. And I'm going to answer both, I'm an executive director and I'm a mom of 2 little kids under 3, right? And so when we think about community safety, I really just encourage us to think about what people have access to and access to opportunity. Because when I sit across from people who have lost hope, which Mateo referenced earlier, that is when I worry about whether or not there's a safety concern there. And typically when individuals have lost hope, it's because so many doors have been shut to them. It's because they've heard no over and over again. It's because despite building skills or working to ensure that they have substance use disorder supports in place or mental health services in place, they're being held to a restriction that they can't move beyond. And so for me, and in this situation, I think really looking at how this individual is showing up is really important, and thinking about maybe, think the counter narrative to this is maybe actually how the city is keeping our neighbors and its constituents safe is actually by giving this individual an opportunity. I don't know the individual, right? So this is I can't speak to the situation, but I would actually say that individual having access to constant employment and financial security may be the most important factor in that individual staying the course, not recidivating, and keeping the safety of the community. And we should consider both equally.
Yeah, I think that was well said. I think that, I mean, and what happens, let's look at the negative. What happens if this person is let go, right? What could we anticipate what would happen?
That's right.
And I think that's the concern at this point. If this person's obviously been working this job and been real successful at doing it until this became sensationalized. But I would say it also sends a message to everyone else, even those who are not charged with that type of offense, right? How the city of Boston and how we as a body will look at these types of offenses, right? Whether it's just where we're talking about a level 3 offender or just anyone with a murder charge or attempted murder or what have you. So I think we have to be careful about the message we're sending and also the impact. And if I was in the circumstance personally, meaning the employer, I wouldn't move to release him. I don't know if it's a him or her, but I wouldn't move to release the individual personally. I think that looking at what that person has been doing, evaluating all those other factors in which I'm sure it's beyond my pay grade what the city has to do to kind of figure out, whether or not that person could stay in that position if it doesn't violate any law, any legislative laws. And if it doesn't, then that person has to be given the same opportunity as everyone else, I would say.
As city officials, you have an obligation to protect the public. And that's part of what you do. And I don't envy the position because you have to legislate somehow, but there's no perfect rule. There's no perfect legislation that's going to cover everybody, which means that you have to have, in addition to, you have to have people that are in place that are able to evaluate an individual. A law doesn't evaluate individuals. People evaluate individuals. So being able to sit down and have a conversation, and probably more than one conversation with somebody, is an important piece. Resources are limited. Can we afford to have more people that specifically do this thing? I don't know. But I think that the answer is to treat people as individuals, to not think that a rule or a law is going to cover everybody, and to find a way, if we're really concerned about protecting the public, the biggest piece, to echo Aaron, is stressors create crime. When a person, it doesn't matter whether it's domestic violence, drug crime, sex offense, all the above, stressors create crime, and or they're leading up to it. They're the catalyst, and how they deal with that stress is a big issue. The biggest stressor is, do I have a place to live? Do I have a place to work? Can I afford it? And if those are in place, they'll be more apt to stay stable and not reoffend. Plain and simple.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. So I would try a shorter second round, 3 minutes, but if you, I'm going to throw it to Councillor Flynn. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And let me continue. Let me continue with Mac. I had an opportunity last week to visit a women's recovery home in Roxbury. It was called the Valentine Home.
Oh, nice.
Wonderful, wonderful group of women there. Well, let me ask Mac or anyone else on the panel. But women coming out of jail, women coming out of prison, anything significant challenges they have as it relates to their employment in CORI, anything that's significantly different from a man in whether or not there are certain types of jobs that they've tried to enter or it's challenging for them to enter into employment or training programs? And does the CORI impact a woman more so than it may impact a man? I don't know.
Well, I want to first start off by just saying that when a woman is locked up in state custody, she does not have nearly the access in what happens in a man's prison. So they are really underserved when it comes to preparing for reentry at an alarming rate, right? Like it just can't be measured. When you add that into job readiness and reentry, you know, to me, they are even more challenged than those who are coming or who are equally deprived the right to actually access the training at the men's prison. So I think the impact across is equal to a certain degree, but I do think that the level of in which, because they don't even have the opportunities, it don't exist at the prison, and then upon entry becomes even greater, a greater significant impact, which in my mind, I don't understand why we're talking about building a $360 million prison, but that's a different subject for a different time. And from what I've experienced from the women that I know who are out here trying to get job employment, yes, it has been a real challenge, you know, mostly because they come from such a disadvantaged learning curve of what to expect, how to apply, how to navigate the processes, and then even understanding, like, you know, their CORI, you know.
Yeah, the other aspect of the CORI, and maybe whoever would like to respond, the other aspect of a CORI is sealing a CORI is also an opportunity. And there's a lot of pros in terms of sealing a CORI, but also there could be cons as well of sealing a CORI, unfortunately. But I mention that because I have called for a hearing order on reentry services. I haven't actually had the hearing yet. I didn't make the right effort yet to do that. But I'd like to try to do it before the end of the year, is have a hearing on reentry services for people coming out of jail and in prison. Know what I found one of the most discouraging aspects too, besides the employment aspect of people getting hired, then getting laid off or fired, is, and this is going back many years, but the challenge of even not having a birth certificate was extremely frustrating to the men that would come to me on probation. And I would literally walk them from right here at the Suffolk Superior Courthouse down to down to here, down to City Hall to get a birth certificate. But, you know, that they came out oftentimes with the limited preparation in terms of how to be successful on probation or parole, or even not on probation or parole, but not having a structured or having any type of residence. And then just going to say, I'm gonna go to the Pine Street Inn, I'm gonna go to another location, was almost a system, a setup for failure, in my opinion.
Yes.
Coming out of jail with any supportive housing, was like going up to playing baseball and going up to bat with 2 strikes on you before you even step in the batter's box. How are you gonna get a hit off that? But what do you think about housing then?
That is a real subject as far as folks who are coming home. Most of them are in the programs waiting for opportunities for housing. We have an excellent program in the Justice for Housing who actually provides that services. But what we've seen is that there hasn't been great opportunity because the need is so big, right? So large, and that's true across the Commonwealth. But also it's like, how do we support these services that are providing the houses? So I think Justice for Housing went from 50 to now 10. And you got 10 vouchers or Section 8s that are for eligible people returning home. You know, it's almost incredible. So there's a long wait in these programs, like, for instance, I'm just trying to think of the program out in Fenway, Brookhouse. There's a long extended wait in houses, in residential houses like that, for folks to try to transition out because they can't leave without. And I think, to your point, when you think about the negative impact of CORIs, and you as a probation officer know this, or parole officer know this, is that if you can't secure a job, then you technically are in violation, and then you end up back in the carceral system, you know, on the basis of that, unless, you know, someone, you know, decides to, take leniency. But in most cases, that doesn't happen. In the Black and brown community, it leads to technical violation.
Including fees. I don't think someone should be on probation for, I've seen people on probation for 5 years. That's way too long. I think someone should be on probation for 18 months or 12 months. Structurally work with them and help them the best you can for 12 months, but then let them go on but you are right, a lot of people are in violation of probation because of fees, because of not engaged in employment or training, or I literally had people that couldn't get from a various neighborhood in Boston because they didn't have the money for the MBTA. So I don't know what it is, $2, so $4 round trip. So they wouldn't come to see me, and I would say to them, what do you mean you don't have $2 on you? Or you don't have $4 on you? But that's the case. A lot of people don't. I'm fortunate to have, $10 in their pocket, but especially people coming out of jail or prison. And so that's another strike they have against them. What about the opportunity of giving them a free Metro card, a Charlie card, I guess?
Absolutely.
When you come out of prison and extend it for 1 year.
Sure.
But I know I'm completely out of time. Mr. Chair, I apologize for going over.
I would like to weigh in, if I could, on the housing issue. It's a small thing, and I think it's state, not city, that does this, but it's something that Boston can do locally. One of the things, we have a lot of sober houses in the state. There's a lot of sober houses around, and some of them have a lot of empty beds. And part of the reason why they're empty is because they charge a lot of money. State will cover 90 days with the special program, but after that, you're expected to work and pay your way. 90 days is not a lot of time when a guy first gets out to try to get a job and be able to pay $1,000, $1,200 a month now on rent. I think that should also be extended, at least citywide, to extend a program to, 6, 8 months, maybe even a year to cover that so that they can get themselves a job, go on interviews, and do what they need to do with all the stuff they got to do when they come out. So that's one thing that I think could help. It's a small thing, but it's not small for those that need it. So.
Right.
And I think just very quickly, I think having the same conversation around housing that we're having around employment is critical, right? So I'm not positioned to speak to the housing application like legality, but I think the level in which we're talking about what should be considered, not considered, what are the factors, not the factors around how someone's CORI impacts their ability to access safe housing is something that the city could certainly talk about and lead on, and should.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilor Mejia?
Yes, thank you.
3 minutes. We're trying to, there's another hearing at 2, trying to give central staff
Yeah, absolutely.
time. So.
Thank you. Thank you. And so I am a big proponent of looking at the whole person, right? So I'm glad that we're really thinking about holistically every aspect of your needs as you're coming back to acclimate, right? So I think housing and education and workforce development are all interconnected. And I think that oftentimes we are in silos. And I think that's why I ask about the whole person, not just the bits and pieces of the situation. Because we're really good at triaging. We're not good at treating the wound and keeping it healed. But my question is, and it's more like a comment and a question, right? So I used to do work, I've had 100 jobs, but one of them was working with the Suffolk County's Sheriff's Department on a program called Family Matters. And our role in that coalition was to help our incarcerated loved ones come back home. I know we're talking about work, but the whole village needs to be prepared as well, right, to really receive. And I think that that's also a part of the conversation that we need to add into the mix, is the repairing the harm with our families, and also how do we keep our incarcerated loved ones connected to their children through the Boston Public Schools. All of those things are part of the full picture. My question is more around the municipal. We're working on trying to establish a municipal ID here in the city of Boston, like other progressive cities. And initially, our goal was to help support people, our returning citizens and folks who are undocumented, so that they can get a municipal ID, so they can go to the bank, go to the library, get everything that they need with an ID. And I know that's one of the hardest things to get. And you mentioned that earlier. And sometimes it costs $50 to get an ID, or right? Have you seen, can you talk about why it's important to offer IDs to our returning citizens, our incarcerated loved ones, when they come back home?
Because
what's the ID do?
Because the process of it, to go and try to obtain it, is a whole process in of itself. So it's like, first you got to get your birth certificate, you got to try to track down your social security card, as opposed to if you get it while you're there and incarcerated, they already can cooperate who you are, right? So it's just like, okay, we know this person is Mac Hudson, therefore we can give you the ID. If not, then I'm left to then try to go to, first of all, I haven't seen a birth certificate in forever, so I got to find out where they hold the birth certificate. That is, then go to the vital records, get that, then get the SSI number, get my social security number, and then go and try to get a place of residence in Boston or somewhere that I'm staying, if not in a program, and then go get my ID. And I can't do nothing until I get an ID first. I can't do it, not even the basic fundamental stuff, right? So you need an ID to almost access anyway, sometimes into buildings, into just you need the ID. So, and to apply for jobs and actually be considered for jobs, right? So that's the real importance and significance of it, something that I think they're supposed to have been handled 3 times over, but hasn't yet. You know, so I like the idea that you're proposing because someone has to take control of this. And I always raise the question, where is the money going that's allocated to do this job if they're not doing it? I don't understand that.
Yeah. No, I appreciate, I know the time went off. And I will just end with, you know, I also see it as an opportunity to give people a little bit back of dignity, right? I think having an official document, you know, whether it is an ID, it really signifies that you are whole. And I think that if we could do that on the municipal level, I think that we're working towards repairing that harm. So plug my little project here publicly.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor Mejia. Madam President, Louis Jen, 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm going to return back the time because I know that there's another hearing. I just want to thank you all for standing in the gap for so many of the folks who need it the most. Thank you.
Okay, just Councilor Flynn, you know, with your experience in the field and spearheading these, I don't know if you wanted to ask another question or make a statement before we wrap up.
Mr. Chair, I won't ask any question. I just want to say thank you to you for conducting and holding these hearings, and want to say thank you to the panel for the important work that you are doing in the community, for your leadership, for your advocacy, for being here today, and thank you for working with us. And I hope to follow up with you offline, and I'd love to sit down and learn more about your program. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, yeah, I want to thank the panelists. Thank you for being here and helping educate us, or at least me, and participating in the conversation with my colleagues. So I'm going to dismiss this panel for public testimony. I see the 3 people signed up are the panelists, so we've heard from you already. Online? No? Okay. So I just, you know, as the chair, I want to thank Ron and Ethan from Central Staff for their help with running today's hearing. I'd like to thank our panelists, you know, and my colleagues for their participation as well. This hearing on docket numbers 0323 and 1618 is adjourned. Thank you.